This is the second national forum organized by MSIA, supported by Malaysia Productivity Corporation, Electrical and Electronics Productivity Nexus, and SEMI Southeast Asia. As the theme suggests, we will be having 2 panel sessions with the topics of CHIP Act and US restrictions and sustainability in the E&E industry, with a keynote presentation shortly. These sessions will be moderated and attended by various semiconductor experts. Ladies and gentlemen, to commence this ceremony, may I now invite Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Wong Siew Hai, President of MSIA, to deliver his speech. Please welcome.
Thank you, Abigail, for the introduction. Yang Berusaha Encik Siva Suryamuthi, Deputy Chief Executive Officer, MIDA, Malaysia Investment Development Authority, Bertrand Stolz, Executive Vice President, Asia Pacific, Asia Public Affairs and Managing Director, Singapore, ST Microelectronics Asia Pacific, panelists and moderators from overseas and from Malaysia, members of MSIA Board, MSIA Charter members, MSIA members, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of Malaysia Semiconductor Industry Association, I would like to extend a warm welcome and selamat datang to everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Siva, Deputy CEO from Malaysia Investment Development Authority, for his presence at today's forum. I also want to thank Bertrand Stolz, the Executive Vice President, Asia Public Affairs and Managing Director of Singapore of ST Microelectronics, for his presence at today's forum. The theme for this year's National E&E Forum is Powering Semiconductor Growth Through These Challenging Times. Today, the E&E industry is a major contributor to Malaysia's economy. Malaysia is one of the top 10 critical global hubs for semiconductors and electronics, accounting for 7% of total global semiconductor trade and 13% of global semiconductor testing and packaging. E&E is a high technology and high value added industry and is touted to be the new oil, where technology is pervasive in all sectors of the economy and in all aspects of human life. E&E is a catalyst to catapult Malaysia towards a high income and high technology country. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Malaysian government for all the good work and the support they have given to the industry, including a business-friendly environment and excellent infrastructure. I'm happy to note that for the first time, RMK12 has identified the E&E industry as one of the 8 strategic and high-impact industry, and the new investment policy of the NIP has identified the E&E sector as the first wave of investment transformation. MIDA is doing a fantastic job attracting high-value investments into Malaysia that support, deepen, and complement the E&E ecosystem in Malaysia. Malaysia must also seize the opportunities arising from the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. CPTPP has come into effect on November 29, 2022. The E&E sector will be one of the key beneficiaries of the CPTPP. Malaysia must join the CPTPP. According to the findings of cost-benefit analysis on the potential impacts of the CPTPP on the Malaysian economy and key economic sectors, published by MITI on 25th July 2022. The E&E sector is likely to gain the most from increased market access due to elimination of tariffs and reduction of non-tariff barriers under the CPTPP, especially for Canada, Mexico, and Peru, as Malaysia do not have any free trade agreement with these 3 countries. Tariff elimination will increase Malaysia's export competitiveness in Canada, Mexico, and Peru. The CPTPP provides E&E sector with a wider sourcing channels and possibility of lower cost of raw materials through tariff elimination on imported input products. Additional sourcing options will be beneficial for SMEs and companies which do not already enjoy customs duty exemption. These factors above, better market access and wider sourcing channels, may lead to increasing investment in Malaysia, as well as investors are able to leverage on the CPTPP opportunities. Malaysia government need to be steadfast in their decision and not waver. We expect them to move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the industry is facing headwinds, slowing global demand, rising costs, and geopolitical developments with the CHIP Act and the Ukraine war. Remember, tough times do not last, only tough people do. We need to be prepared to face these challenges. There are opportunities during any crisis. We need to seize these opportunities and strike when the iron is hot. The objective of the Malaysia National E&E Forum is to bring the stakeholders of the industry together to discuss issues and challenges faced by the E&E industry. The forum hopes to contribute to the continued growth of the industry in a more sustainable way, a more inclusive way, and ultimately a more profitable, worthwhile, beneficial way for all the stakeholders: government, companies, MNCs, LLCs, SMEs, environment, workforce, and the rakyat. The forum this year will focus on CHIP Act and the US restrictions and sustainability in the E&E industry. We have gathered speakers and panelists from renowned organizations to share their views today, such as SIA, the Semiconductor Industry Association, Credit Suisse, Deloitte, Western Digital, SEMI, EY, Ernst & Young, and Dell. I thank you for your attendance today, and I hope we will have a lively and engaging discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri. Now it is my pleasure to invite Yang Berusaha Mr. Siva Suryamurthy Sundararaja, Deputy CEO of MIDA, to deliver his opening remarks. Please welcome.
A very good morning to all and welcome to MIDA. Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Wong Siu Hai, President, Malaysia Semiconductor Industry Association, or MSIA, Mr. Bertrand Stolz, Executive Vice President, Asia, Public Affairs and Managing Director, Singapore, ST Microelectronics Asia Pacific Private Limited. Esteemed panelists, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence and support towards the Malaysia National Electrical and Electronics or E&E Forum 2022. It is a distinct privilege to be surrounded by some of today's eminent minds in the E&E industry in particular, and to be a part of this forum. I would like to extend my heartfelt congratulations to all the organizing team for orchestrating this forum. The 2022 Malaysia National E&E Forum provides a venue for the development of the E&E industry and its related industries, thereby furthering its contribution to our nation's progress. This illustrious assembly offers an opportunity for the sharing of insight and empowering the industry to remain abreast of the ever-evolving technological vista while allowing prospective investors to recognize Malaysia's preeminent advantages as a premier investment destination. As the world's leading technology companies in Malaysia continues to enhance their capabilities and provide exemplary guidance in the various components of the semiconductor field. They collaborate with forward-thinking local entities to further solidify our E&E ecosystem. In this regard, MIDA has been fortunate to work with MSIA since its establishment in 2021 to strategically develop and elevate Malaysia's semiconductor ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, the E&E industry is integral to the manufacturing sector and serves as an important element of the nation's economic prosperity. Malaysia, a veritable cornerstone of the global semiconductor industry, produced 13% of the world's back-end semiconductors in 2021, with exports accounting for 40% of total national output. The domestic E&E industry is expected to uphold its trajectory of growth. To further strengthen semiconductor supply chain, Malaysia has signed the US-Malaysia Memorandum of Cooperation, or MOC, in May 2022 on semiconductor supply chain resilience, which aim to provide guiding principle for both our nations. Up till early of this year, the biggest challenge facing the global semiconductor industry was shortages, mainly triggered by soaring demand in electronic consumer products such as PCs and smartphones during pandemic. Unfortunately, chip makers are now facing growing inventory and shrinking demand. Inflationary pressures, combined with the US-China trade tension, where US had taken another step towards hamstring its geopolitical rival with export ban, have caused some trepidation and could pose difficulties for some semiconductor global players and disrupt the global supply chain. Semiconductors players' response has been to diversify into new markets, namely automotive, cloud computing data centers, and for networking gear and devices for hyper-connected future of the Internet of Things, or IoT. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 50 years, we have strived to position our local marketplace as a holistic E&E ecosystem. This has enabled front-end and back-end semiconductor manufacturing activities and trade to commence at the highest level. Malaysia continues to attract high-quality investments in the manufacturing sector of ringgit Malaysia 43.1 billion for the period of January to June this year, reflecting the country's competitiveness as a preferred location for investment in the region. Among the subsectors of the Malaysian manufacturing industry, E&E proves its mettle and robustness by continuously attracting the highest number of investments. During this period, the industry recorded a total of 19.4 billion ringgit Malaysia in approved investments, and we expect to generate over 13,000 job opportunities, including highly skilled positions such as managerial, engineers, and technicians. The E&E industry also contributes significantly to Malaysia's GDP growth, which is targeted to generate ringgit Malaysia 120 billion by the year 2025 and ringgit Malaysia 495 billion in export earnings, playing a vital role in our country's industrial development. In addition to its economic contribution, the E&E industry has also helped build Malaysia's international reputation. The investments will facilitate the socio-economic development of the local area and providing high-income employment opportunities. Malaysia has garnered the esteem of some of the world's most renowned and pioneering electronic companies, such as Intel, ST Microelectronics, Infineon, Micron, Texas Instruments, TFAMD, and Osram, who have expanded their presence in Malaysia. It is to be noted that 6 out of the 12 of the largest semiconductor companies are currently operating in Malaysia. As many reputable MNC brands continue to establish their operations in Malaysia, we have seen the steady growth of aspiring local companies in our industry meeting the industrial needs of the MNCs and being very much part of the global value chain. These illustrious companies, to name a few, Inari Emerton, Kasem, Unisem, Globetronics, Emulus, and Beast Dynamics, extend their services to a wide range of clients in the automotive, consumer, power management, industrial, and medical industries. Their invaluable contribution to the E&E industry is of paramount importance as we pay homage to their unwavering dedication, audacious drive, and loyalty to advancing the sector. Ladies and gentlemen, the government is focused on accelerating the adoption and adaptation of advanced factory automation and digitalization levels to transition existing operations into smart factories to enhance flexibility and optimize productivity and growth. Under the National Investment Aspirations, or NIA, the new investment policy is an ambitious plan of action to promote and enliven both FDI and DDI in Malaysia. The master strategy is made up of 6 strategic components, including implementing a sustainable investment strategy based on the NIA and ESG agenda. The significance of ESG adoption continues to grow. Companies are urged to assess and adjust their business models to strengthen their readiness for ESG adoption. By incorporating the ESG-based model into their business practices, businesses will be able to remain competitive in the global market and position themselves for continued success. MIDA is committed to building resilient and sustainable electronic supply chain in Malaysia and the ASEAN region. We pursue high quality and technology-driven investments to boost socio-economic development. Apart from local industry players, we are expanding the benefits of our manufacturing ecosystem to global businesses and brands. We seek to develop more players for the front end, especially in the integrated circuit or IC design, engineering and testing, IC packaging and manufacturing modules, system devices, and finished products. This critical front-end manufacturing needs to be groomed to link to the global value chain. In addition, the growing participation and R&D efforts in the different layers of our domestic and foreign investors will also enhance the industry's value chain. Companies that adopt and adapt Industry 4.0 related technologies can optimize the productivity and growth and maintain the efficiency of business operations in the face of rapid changes in the technology cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, MIDA has proudly charted its course through the changing tides of industry, securing ever-increasing success in catering to investors. With the prospect of a mutually advantageous partnership with MSIA, MIDA is assured that its endeavors to advance Malaysia's E&E industry will be a resounding success. With the right strategies and knowledge, businesses can capitalize on the industry's potential growth, which will further boost the nation's economy. On that note, thank you to Malaysia Semiconductor Industry Association, or MSIA, for the opportunity to share my thoughts at the Malaysia National Electrical and Electronics Forum 2022. Have a productive session and a wonderful day. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siva. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's start off today's agenda with the keynote speaker. Before I welcome the speaker, please allow me to share some of his charming background. He started his career in the finance department of SGS Thomson in Tours, France in 1994. In 2002, he moved to Singapore to lead the Estes Asia Internal Audit Team. He holds an honors degree with a major finance from the Institute of Political Studies in Lyon, France. He's now ST Microelectronics Executive Vice President in charge of Finance, Global Shared Services and Systems. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Bertrand Stolz.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for welcoming me today, I will say as a keynote speaker, to this E&E Forum. Mr. Siva, Deputy CEO of MIDA, Dato Seri Sechwong, President of MSIA, thank you very much for welcoming me here today among you. I'm just back from Europe, so I will ask you some apologies if time to time I'm not saying everything right. So I will start first as soon as this one is fixed. Okay. Before starting my, my presentation, just a few introduction comments. As been mentioned already by the two previous speakers, I believe that semiconductor industry today is at a specific time and moment in its life. I am in this industry since 28 years. This industry is much older than that, but has never been so important the acknowledgement and the awareness of the role of semiconductor industry in the global economic activity. It's the first time since years that semiconductor is at the heart of all the consideration, of all the challenge of the economy, and that so many people are becoming aware, so many governments, so many organizations are becoming aware of the role of semiconductor in our economy. At the point that anything that is happening today in the world may impact the semiconductor industry. Not mentioning Taiwan, not mentioning Europe, not mentioning US, not mentioning whatever is happening also between the two blocks of West and China. So we have this big opportunity today to increase the awareness of the semiconductor industry and the role that this industry can play going forward in our economy. And I think this is a unique challenge for all of us. I have decided today to bring you through the journey of what we call the sustainable world in ST Microelectronics, where we create technology for a sustainable world in a sustainable way. I don't want to go into the detail of business review, that may be boring for some of you, but more to put in perspective the way, as a company, we handle the sustainable activity and how we perform our activity and how we forecast and we project ourselves in the sustainable activity. First of all, just a few words maybe on ST Microelectronics itself. When we are one of the largest semiconductor company in the world, with more than 48,000 employees today, out of which 8,400 in R&D. We reached 12.8 billion revenue in 2021. We will reach, based on our last, I would say, forecast given to the market in Q4 2022, we reached $16.1 billion in 2022, which is a growth of more than 26% year over year. Just to show, I would say, as an example, the speed and the increase of semiconductor activities. We are present in more than 80 sales and marketing offices to serve around 200,000 customers around the globe. We have 14 manufacturing sites, and we are the signatory of the UNGC, the United Nations Global Compact, and member of the Responsible Business Alliance. Our strategic focus as a company rely on automotive industry, where we are leading in the car electrification, and industrial, where we're leading in power and energy management, in personal electronics, and in communication equipment, where we address selected high-volume applications like satellite and computer and peripheral. Our global presence, okay, I will not go through all the footprint, but we are present a bit everywhere. And if we go now more between Europe and Asia, because we are a European company, French, Italian, European company originally, we are present between Sweden, France, Italy, Morocco, and Malta, where we aim to have front-end and back-end manufacturing. And in Asia, where our footprint started in 1969 in Singapore, with the first back-end operation. Then in 1974 in Malaysia, with the first largest back-end operation in Asia, followed by China and Philippines. A small focus on our operation in Malaysia. ST Microelectronics in Muar, we are in the south of Malaysia, which is a bit, I would say, unique compared to the rest of the cluster of semiconductor, which is more located in the north. ST is an advanced back-end manufacturing facility specialized in high complexity and high reliability packages. We have a major portion that is dedicated to automotive product, and this is what has been mentioned, and maybe we will discuss later on. We are the leader in automotive product engineering and test development. Products that are assembled and tested in this site include automotive smart power, automotive microcontroller unit, MCU, car audio, and global navigation system. We have 4,000 employees, roughly 4,000 employees, and we occupy 37 square meters on the footprint of the site. At ST, we create technology for a sustainable world. And very important, we do it in a sustainable way, prioritizing people and protecting the climate, with a aim to generate long-term value for all our stakeholders. And this presentation is structured in this way, like a sustainability report, that, by the way, is available on our website for a full, I would say, documentation. But where I am pleased to say that we have issued this year the 25th annual sustainable report. In reality, we do sustainability for more than 30 years now. And that's why it's more easy for us to lead in all different aspects. It means that sustainability is not something that we have discovered recently with all the new norms that are going to be or are imposed by, I would say, number of worldwide bodies or organizations. As I say, we are sustainable technology in a sustainable way and in a sustainable company to generate long-term value for all our stakeholders. And is a long-standing public commitment to sustainability. It means that, as mentioned, we started way back when we are incorporated in 1987 as a merge of two companies, SGS and Thomson, and all the way, I would say, till today and until 2027, that is our commitment to be carbon neutral. We deliver and we committed a number of, I would say, ingredients showing that sustainability is not new for us. We have been part of the first 5 companies to join the Electronic Industry Citizenship Coalition. Has been so successful that it changed its name to become the Responsible Business Alliance. We signed the UNGC Compact in 2000, and we have since published external long-term commitments since 1994. And we just recently updated this commitment through our Sustainability Charter, which is public information, and you can find on our website. How do we do this? We create technology for sustainable world. What does it mean? There is a transition to clean, safe, and smarter system with a dedicated automotive IC, advanced technology like silicon carbide, with ultra-low power consumption micro, discrete MEMS. So we address through all our technology the smart mobility, the power energy, and the Internet of Things, and the 5G. In this way, we allow and support the proliferation of all, I would say, semiconductor components. Let's have a look to more detailed activities. In smart mobility, we provide innovative solutions to our customers to make the driving safer, greener, and more connected for everyone. In that we have the electrification and digitalization of all, I would say, the car industry. We increase the safety for the road users and driver comfort and convenience. Affordable and desirable electrical vehicle moved from 9% in 2019 to over 20% in 2025, and we see more than 75% of cars built in the next 10 years that will be electrical cars. And of course, cleaner, greener internal combustion engine, which is still over 90% of new vehicle products for the time being. The pervasion of semiconductor industry is key, and especially in the automotive industry. As you can see, it took 15 years to see the number of chips per vehicle to multiply by 1.5, 15 years. In the last 5 years, it has multiplied by 2. In the next 5 years, it will be multiplied again by 2. See, this dynamic of the automotive market is endless since a couple of years, and we show that the pervasion of the semiconductor, which started, as I mentioned, way back in 2002, there are two things. There is permanent increase of the semiconductor content, and there is, I would say, a strong acceleration. Means that we don't see any slowing down of this activity in terms of semiconductor in the automotive industry. And there is a complete decorrelation today between the number of cars that are produced. We are not yet exactly back to the number of cars produced before the pandemic, and the semiconductor content. In that when you look at the number of cars today, roughly, we are at the same level than before pandemic. In terms of semiconductor content, we have increased by 50%. This gives you some hints of what happened to the industry and to the automotive industry in the last few years. This decorrelation has created tremendous hit in the supply chain and requested all the major players of this industry to reconsider the supply chain and the resilience of the supply chain. We may rediscuss. The need for semiconductor is driven by multiple trends, of course, as I mentioned, by the car volume, by the pervasion in the traditional application, that the legacy automobile application require also more and more silicon content. If I take the example of the electronic stability control, that is a functionality that we are requiring in the past, few years ago, one ECU and few IC. Today, we need to multiply by 3 the content of the ECU and by 13 the number of semiconductor inside, just for basic application of semicon in the legacy activity. Then we have the extended feature in order to have a better experience in terms of driving, additional safety, extended comfort drive, and the introduction of new car functions. So here again, add additional semiconductor content. Disruptive trend with electrification and digitalization, and this one is obvious and known from all of us now as we see the number of electrical cars and the race of all the car makers to make sure that they will be in line with the requirement to have electrical car made and available by, depending of the country. Europe is 2035, China is much earlier, US not yet fixed. But for sure, everybody today is in a race and wants to be number one. We have seen that during this pandemic, to be late or to not be ready from a supply chain point of view has created tremendous jam in the supply chain. And then from a legislation and functional safety, of course, we see many requirements. The contribution to the proliferation of electric car, as we see, and I may not go to the detail of this chart, but through all, I would say, the contribution of the vehicle, the electric plug-in plate, full hybrid, and depending of the other car, we see a content and key components increasing and present everywhere. There is, and maybe just to give you some content, The electrification has increased significantly the car content silicon. We were a few years back with $550 semiconductor content in electrical car. We reached $1,300, or we have reached already in between commercial and electrical. And then in the autonomous driving, the digitalization, we were around $350. We reached $850 semiconductor content. So the content of semiconductor is increasing more and more year after year with all the new system and new requirement of electronics in the car. And we don't see, for the time being, I'm sorry to say, but we don't see any end to this. Focusing now on the power and energy itself, ST, of course, enable customers to increase energy efficiency everywhere, and we support the use of renewable energy sources. And this, again, important to see in this area what we are doing. There is a rising demand for the usage of electrical energy. More than 30% of global electricity will increase between now and 2030. There is a decrease of carbon emission to reduce the global warming impact, 45% of CO2 emission reduction from 2010 to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees, hoping that everybody will stick to it. And we see an increase of use of renewable energy. Electrical energy from renewable source will increase from 10 to 30% to 20% in 2030. And we need to play a role in this area as well. Nearly 70% of all industrial electrical energy is used to power electric motors. We see through the control unit, the driver, the power switch, and the power management, a number of key components that we can bring in order to support, I would say, the increase of consumption of electricity, but also to control it. We help also to save energy in home and building with the washing machine. I will take some example. When in the washing machine, when we move from class D to class A++, 40% of energy saving. Same for air conditioning, digital consumer power supply, and electronic lighting. So everywhere where we put semiconductor, we generate energy savings. Smart agriculture as well, let's do not forget. We have a number of challenges for the rubber tapping, which is labor intensive, and the pandemic has impacting the worker availability. Pandemic has highlighted a number of issues and asked us to address it in a more, I would say, sustainable way. The optimal timing for rubber is 2 to 5 a.m. Okay, fine. We cannot tap during the rain, and robotic solutions suffer interference from power line for wireless communication. So, solution. We put smart connected rubber harvesting robots with LoRa wireless technology and providing, like that, immunity to power line interference. So supporting, I would say, the long-lasting usage. Then the weather monitoring and postponement of tapping during the rain with our component like STM32. As a benefit, there are better conditions for our workers, optimal yield, and sustainable solutions. So this is a way that semiconductor is also bringing added value in agriculture. So again, semiconductor now everywhere. Medical testing as a sustainable technology as well. The PCR, point of care medical testing using PCR technology, was not available in an easily deploying format. We developed and we patented in ST a cartridge instrument solution with high volume, and it was derived from the cartridge solution that we're using for the printer in the past. We developed and customized some content, biological content and reagent to detect viral and bacterial pathogen with, I would say, a partner. And again, using our STM32, which is, I would say, our microcontroller, we managed to get rapid and cost-efficient point-of-care testing, allowing immediate remote diagnosis, and it was requested during the pandemic. We have a unique product life cycle approach, meaning that our sustainable technology program aims to develop the responsible product in sustainable way across the full life cycle, meaning that we have a permanent exercise to make sure during, I would say, between the product development, the manufacturing, the usage, the end of life, and the raw material, a respect of minimum standard. We are 100% conflict-free mineral sourcing, 99.99 product eco-pack, 100% new products through eco-design processes. We are following a number of norms like ISO 14000, IECQ, and we target ultra-low power solution, enabling technology, environmental, and well-being application. It is a permanent commitment and involvement of our company to sustainable way of producing our product in semiconductor. And our target is to have at least 50% of the new product recognized as sustainable technology. This is one of our commitments. Another example of the way we consider, I would say, sustainability. Take example of our manufacturing operation in Muar, in Malaysia. ST Malaysia, ST Muar, is pioneer in what we call the non-etching adhesion promoter, NEAP. And this addresses the growing demand for higher package reliability that are mainly in automotive and sustainability. This boasts an environmental friendly approach coupled with fast multi-sourcing qualification, and we are able to mass production since end of 2021 at our ST Muar site, and is the first site in ST to produce in this way. Packaging, the way we use the packaging for our product. Taking example, with our STM32, that is contributing to the effort of the company to reduce its environmental impact. In 2021, we have created and improved an eco-friendly packaging that eliminates the need for plastic blister packs, because in the past we were using a lot of plastic blister packs. So the design has been changed. The box has been made from recycled cardboard, and we have used water-based ink, making it fully eco-friendly and recyclable. The toughness of the box also makes it 100% reusable. Again, here, strong impact to make sure that we don't pollute anymore. All these changes are combined with reduced annual plastic consumption by 15 tons per year, which is the first in this kind for the packaging. Coming after that to our people. Talk about product, but let's talk also of how we do with people. We prioritize the people everywhere, starting with leading health and safety practices. We saw it during the pandemic we went through, I would say. We always gave priority to the health of our people. Anywhere we were operating, the health of our people was the #1 priority before operation. We are working for the best safety performance in terms of number of injury, and a strong employee engagement with the overall employee engagement survey, and COVID crisis management, full set of governance and measure everywhere. We distributed more than 10 million masks. We did a number of donations, and we had created an assistance to all the family of our employees, 24 hours on 24 hours during this pandemic crisis. Our employee experience is, we want to offer the best employee experience where we operate everywhere. We want to be recognized as a market leader within the employer, with dynamic and innovative culture. We foster a strong spirit of enterprise, cooperation, responsibility, and leadership. And we want to attract, train, and retain a diverse, talented workforce at the core of our growth strategy. Here, maybe let me make additional comment. What we have realized also during this pandemic and the increase of, I would say, the semiconductor activities industry is the issue we are facing with labor forces. Labor forces are not unlimited. Being operator, being technical people, or being engineers. And there is a strong competition. And we see difficulties everywhere in the world where we operate to attract and keep people because of this challenge, because of the competition, because of the number of people that are receiving, I would say, training or, I would say, graduation, that are not unlimited. And for this, you need to be competitive, you need to attract the best, and you need for this to be able to attract the people and to retain them. So that's why we have a number of indicators to measure how our people are perceiving the company and how we want to deliver, I would say, the number of training, learning per employee every year. We foster diversity, equity, and inclusion in many countries. We took here an example in China, where we are on track to achieve the goal of 20% of ladies leaders by 2025. We recruited, despite, I would say, the difficulty of the pandemic, 40% of women undergraduated from campus recruitment in 2021. And we have organized unconscious bias workshop across all the sites. And in China, for instance, more than 400 of our employees went through this we say, training. We protect also the planet. When we say we protect the planet, we are working on one, I would say, key parameter, which is to be carbon neutral by 2027. It is not a date per se. 2027 will be the 40th anniversary of ST Microelectronics, and we aim to be ahead of many industry players or many other companies in the world that normally for this kind of KPI are more in the range of 2030 or after. We, ST, we want to be carbon neutral by 2027. We want to be compliant with a 1.5 degree scenario by 2025, recognized by the BTI, and we want to source 100% of renewable energy by 2027 as well. We have collaborative program and partnership for carbon neutrality throughout our ecosystem, that with our supplier, without customer, with all the stakeholders. 83% reduction in our PFC emission efficiency since 1994. We have reached 51% of renewable electricity, participating in Apple Clean Energy Program, and 27% direct and indirect emission efficiency in 2021 versus 2020. And we continue our program to reach the carbon neutrality. Taking an example also of what we are doing here in our site in Malaysia to reduce our carbon footprint. We have replaced aging equipment in all our facility in Muar with more energy efficiency equipment, talking about air compressor, chiller, or vacuum pump, and new equipment improves the efficiency already by more than 50%. Is an example like another, like this reducing the greenhouse gases abatement in ST for Amokyo, for instance, in our site in Singapore. One of the main, Singapore was one of the main remaining contributors to our direct greenhouse gas emission and has initiated several action plans in order to reduce drastically over the years, I would say, this emission. And we have installed a number of systems to reduce the direct PFC emission by 9% again compared to 2020. And we continue this effort. All these efforts require a huge amount of investment. That is not just change the process, it's not change the way of operating, is also invest a lot in equipment that are more clean. And we are doing all of this. Another example is our carbon footprint reduction in Singapore using the district cooling system that has been announced in last May in Singapore, which is the largest wafer fabrication district cooling system that will be installed in ST and today in Singapore. We'll eliminate up to 120,000 tons of carbon from the environment, equivalent to 30% of ST Singapore carbon emission in 2021 with this installation, and will help to achieve 20% saving in cooling-related electricity consumption annually in order to not continue the race in the consumption of electricity. We are going to spend $370 million over the next 20 years for this district cooling system in our operation. Another example is the way we reduce energy consumption in France. We put a new free cooling system in Rousset, also inaugurated in June. And this is, I would say, use the outside air to cool the production equipment. This reduces the use of refrigeration units during the winter at our manufacturing site in Rousset, south of France, where it's a quite hot place, I think, compared to here. And we aim to reduce energy consumption by 4,500 megawatts per year, minus 20%. Water management, another, I would say, challenge for our industry, for the semiconductor industry, beside electricity, is water management. Our manufacturing site produce ultra-clean water and continually improve the wastewater treatment and water discharge quality. Let's do not be naive, semiconductor use a lot of water and was used to have, I would say, wastewater in large quantities. For instance, we have in our site in Singapore upgraded the fluoride wastewater treatment plant that eliminates the extensive dewatering process and reduce large volume of waste sludge through the dense pellet formation. So this again improve, I would say, the impact that we have on directly on environment. Zero waste and recycling. Together with our customer, we are discussing, and partner, we strive for zero waste while promoting the circular economy. We have programs with all of the stakeholders to minimize the unnecessary resource consumption, aim for zero hazardous waste in landfill, using innovation to replace everywhere hazardous material and or reusing what can be reused. And we want to minimize the waste generated from activities and recycling. The implementing of circular economy program for the residual waste is key for us. In 2021, as an example, 90% of the waste reused, recover, or sent for recycling. We have a target of 95% by 2025, so we are on track to reach this target. Example again with our site in Muar. We spend resin from our site and has been used as alternative fuel in cement plant co-processing to reduce the coal consumption as well. By limiting the spent resin waste disposal to landfill, we recycle 60% in 2021, and we aim to reach more than 95% by end of this year. So everywhere we aim to reduce our impact on the environment. The long-term value for all our stakeholders. We see the risk management as an opportunity for the resilience, agility, and our growth. We monitor and develop our extended supply chain as much as we can, and we promote what we call the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM, in all our ecosystem. And for this, we want to inspire the young and diverse people to choose science and engineering studies and career. As I mentioned previously, we, semiconductor industry, is facing a huge demand of talent in science and engineering. And you cannot just get from university today. You don't have enough. So you need to start backwards from the lowest level of school in order to convince the youngest generation to get involved and choose the science and engineering study and career. Because we have seen, I've seen it in Singapore, I've seen it in many countries, although many of our young people decide to follow science and engineering studies, unfortunately, they do not end in our industry. I'm sorry to say so, but sometimes they end in banking, financial services. Of course, we need all of this, but we need much more in electronics and in semiconductor industry. So we have launched a number of programs in order to start much earlier to convince young people to follow study in science and engineering. And this goes through, we have launched a number of initiatives in 2021, for instance, to reach more than 69,000 beneficiaries, and we have expanded this program to many countries like Korea, Malta, Switzerland, India, and we aim to partner in 20 countries by 2025, all our STEM program. We have a program in Malaysia, we have a program in Singapore, in order to make sure that we increase the awareness through the young generation of their impact through semiconductor in the industry. We have, and these are additional examples in Greater Noida, in our design center in Greater Noida, but also in China, a number of programs in order to involve university, but also the teacher and the student. So we have reached 500 universities, for instance, in China, more than 2,000 teachers and 2 million of students. And we use our product in order to create challenge, in order to get feedback from the young people, using our product, using the board, in order to develop new application or new solution. And believe me, it's quite successful. And it's very interesting to see the young people taking ownership of this new solution. Without going into this detail. Then, of course, we have what we call our ST Foundation. Our ST Foundation is more on the side of the company in order to support the development, the coordination, and sponsor projects that employ modern science and latest technology to promote human progress everywhere in the world. What we aim with ST Foundation is to bridge a digital divide, to make sure that everywhere, kids, young people, have access to the digital world. For instance, in 2021, we trained 86,800 young people with, I would say, computer skills and tablets that we gave to all these kids. And we give courses given by our employee, wherever we operate, in all the countries where we operate. As I say, we are supporting the UN, GC, and all the advanced reporting standards. I will not go through all of this, but just as an example of where we are. And more importantly, we are committed to participate in all the industry rating and benchmark activity. More and more coming with ESG also, I would say, activities. The agency are rating you. And not only we are looking at financial parameters, which are granted, I would say, you need to deliver financial parameters and financial results, but you need to give more in sustainability. And that's why you see now many agencies that are rating the company not only on their ability to deliver financial results, but their ability to be a sustainable company. And this is where also we are part of many ranking in this category. We have received many recognition and awards, but here I don't want to go through all this detail, but interestingly, for instance, in WAR, we won the Rising Star title of the Asia Women in ICT Awards this year. The takeaway of this. First, ST is a diverse and global IDM, integrated device manufacturer. We create, and I hope I have convinced you that we are creating technology for a sustainable world in a sustainable way. We have been committed to sustainability and to transparent reporting on our action for more than 30 years now. And our technology supports smarter, cleaner, and more energy efficient society. We prioritize the people with high level of safety and engagement, and we protect the planet. We are committed to and on track to reach the carbon neutrality by 2027 and use 100% of electrical energy from renewable sources. As a conclusion, we create value for all our stakeholders. I thank you for your attention this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bertrand. Can I ask that you remain on stage for the next session? Yeah. I would like to invite Datuk Sri Wong to the stage together with Mr. Solomon Lortu, Vice President and Managing Director of Penang Operations, Motorola Solution Malaysia Sdn Bhd, to moderate this session with Mr. Bertrand Sols.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bertrand, for sharing such a comprehensive and interesting information about what ST Micro is doing with regards to sustainability and also the automotive industry. So I will hand over the first question to Solomon.
So again, good morning to everybody who is out here and also who are listening in. And first and foremost, Bertrand, thank you for making out here. I know you just got made through an international flight just to be with us here this morning. So really appreciative of the fact. So thank you for sharing an insightful and a fantastic keynote that really relates on how ESG is being relatable to an organization as ST Microelectronics and how you are aspiring towards 2027, which will be coincidentally your 40 years anniversary since you were incorporated in 87, and how you're driving for 100% renewable energy, where all your source is going to be made sure that it's going to be renewable, and also zero neutrality in your carbon footprint. So amazing milestones, and I'm glad to note that you are on track, which is just 5 years down the road. Can you relate to some of the companies out there who'd be maybe curious or keen to understand what were the challenges you were facing as a company in putting you into this track? And 5 years down the road, you'll be achieving it, I'm sure. What are your challenges that you can relate, and what are the initiatives that you have taken to overcome some of these challenges?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. So the challenge is, as I say, is not that we have discovered and we decided to put this in place in the last 2 years and we want to please the market. It's a long journey. So the challenge is more to increase the awareness of all the stakeholders, starting from our employee, of all the challenge, because at the end of the day, as I say, let's do not be naive, semiconductor industry is an industry that has some impact on the environment. First, in terms of consumption of energy, in terms of consumption of water, and in terms also of additional pollution, I would say, of gas and so on. So the challenge was to identify all this issue, to define the plan to solve it timely, and execute. And as you say, we have put target to reach by 2027 the carbon neutrality, coincide with our 40th anniversary, but not only, is also because we want to make sure that our impact on the environment is not negative. Our impact is positive, also because we aim to provide with our product solution that protect the environment. So you cannot, in one side, say, I have products that are there to support and say minimize the impact of pollution and increase the positive impact on the environment, at the same time produce without respecting any of these principles. So that was the challenge, means that we have product that we develop in order to support, I would say, clean environment, and at the same time we work internally with all the stakeholders. We work with our supplier, we work also with our customer, and I've shown you during this presentation some impact, for instance, in the packaging, how we address the issue in packaging, how we address the issue in our manufacturing operation, in our fab, either in backend or in front end, either in Malaysia or in Singapore, but also in Europe. And this is a continuous, I would say, exercise, relentless exercise. We never stop. And it's part of all our KPI at company level. Starting, I was with our CEO last week and the senior executive team, starting from the top management, where we have part of our, I would say, incentive of our result, a large part dedicated to sustainability. And this is cascaded to all our organization to make sure that everybody is involved and tied to this concept of impact on sustainability.
Very good. Thank you for that kind of really a thorough way of relating how you are approaching in achieving your goal. You mentioned about how you also need to tie in your ecosystem of suppliers. What challenges do you face today in terms of bringing your supplier base, both materials and services, to also drive towards your goal? Are you also having some semblance of audit and compliance with your supplier base in order to be able to get them in shape?
Absolutely. We have target to audit of our supplier, 100% of them for each category by 2025. Again, we are on track on this. Of course, the difficulty is in the environment that we are living today, with trade war, with war a bit everywhere. You need to reach out to your supplier, work closely with them, and make sure that on their side, they are on track to reach, I would say, the same target. Of course, I will not tell you that it's an easy job. It's again, team in ST that are working on permanent basis with all our suppliers, customers as well, that are asking us similar things. And as I say, I mean, on certain cases, quite straightforward, very simple. Some other cases need more time, more energy to convince and work with our supplier. But definitely, we have a aim to have 100% covered by 2025, and those that will not be covered will not be retained.
Very good. Go ahead, Esri.
Bertrand, you know, there's a burning question with regards to the chip shortage for the automotive industry. As you know, there was a lot of disruption and a lot of cars were not able to be shipped or sent to the customers. Can you tell us why and what is the situation today? As you know, I had many inquiries to MSIA. How do I get chips from companies in Malaysia because they are producing automotive chips? I have people from China. I got calls from many other countries giving me the part number and say, hey, can you help me get this chip? And I said, okay, but it's not so straightforward. Now tell us what do you expect in the next few years and whether this disruption will be resolved?
Well, what happened is unprecedented. Is a major disruption. What we have experienced in the last few years in the automotive industry has been a major shock for, I would say, not all of us, because we are expecting a bit this, but what happened, just to make it short, during the pandemic, a lot of car makers have decided to stop their operation. The supply chain, you know that the supply chain in automotive is based on the just-in-time, so there is no stock, no buffer stock. So when you stop, you stop. And there is no, I would say, amount of parts that are in inventories for this guy. At the same time, semiconductor companies or other continue to produce. We never stop our operation. But we produce to address the demand, as you were mentioning, for consumer, computer, printer, everything to support the pandemic and the work from home. And suddenly, car maker decided to reopen and try to catch up in an environment where, as I mentioned, the content of semiconductor keep growing. So at the same time, you had the semiconductor components in a car that continue to increase year after year in all the car model. You have a major change, which is to move from conventional car to electrical car. And you have the restart of this activity where all the car makers were asking, but please deliver the parts. To do a semiconductor IC that go in a car, you don't need, like to do a car, 3 or 4 days. You need weeks with S13 to 15 to 17 weeks. When you put all of this plus a spike of the demand, it rushed completely and destroyed completely the supply chain. That nobody in the semiconductor industry, a question of ST Micro, is all, I would say, our peers, Infineon, and all of these guys, were able to provide, I would say, the number of components requested at such period of time, such short period of time. When you have a cycle time to produce components that are 13 weeks or more than 20 weeks, you cannot, I would say, when the guy calls you today, tell him tomorrow I'm going to deliver the parts. Because you stop your operation during a number of months, telling us that you are not needing any more parts because you are managing your supply chain differently. So we are now, and to answer now to your other point, we see a change in the way the automotive industry is working, in that we see more and more the car maker taking a key role in the supply chain, which was not the case before, because they were more relying on the tier 1 or third-party companies. And the car maker now are playing a key role in the way they want to secure capacity in the semiconductor. So working closely with us, asking us to commit capacity, asking us to invest. We have invested a lot in the last 2 years. This year, for instance, just to give you an idea, ST will invest again $3.4 billion for a revenue of $16 billion, more than 20%. So it's huge. And we plan to continue like that in the coming years in order to support automotive industry that is facing the two challenges, as I say, the request of more semiconductor components and the move to electrification and digitalization.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as you've just said, I'm glad to hear that ST Micro is investing to the tune of at least 3.4 billion. You've just said to promote the availability of semiconductor supply. So a lot of industry partners today are actually nervous, right? So is this going to go away in the next year? in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years. So I'm going to ask you to bring up your crystal ball to look at that industry trend that we are in today. What would your expert opinion be in those respect? And the second part of the question would be, will the automotive industry continue to cannibalize the demand of the semiconductors such that the non-automotive industry partners now have to find options? What will be those viable options?
So I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, and I would love, because this will help a lot, our manufacturing operation to plan ahead and to be even more available. Now, what is clear, and when you look, I would say, of WSTS number or any other, I would say, forecast of the market, we see two different patterns. First one, for what concerns consumer, personal electronics, clearly there is a slowdown that is going on now because there was a so big increase of demand during the COVID period that we are normalizing now. I mean, it's not that the market is collapsing, but there is a normalization in this area. We'll see some slowdown. At the opposite, in automotive, there is absolutely no slowdown. And again, it's not because the number of cars produced is increasing like hell. It's because the content of semiconductor inside each car is increasing like hell. That we are putting a lot of more components for electrification, for digitalization, for all the activities I mentioned to you for safety, for the comfort of driving, ADAS. So we are working with Mobileye in order to offer different solutions. I mean, your car tomorrow will be your phone of today. It'll be very, very clear. I mean, today you have a phone that costs, I don't know how much, is huge price, and is a computer fully integrated. Tomorrow, your car is going to follow the same pattern. When you see the breakthrough that has been done by Tesla, for instance, at the end, it was not a car maker. You can say maybe it's a software company. At the end of the day, your car will become a software. And we see a lot of software embedded into the car today, where we need to provide a lot of components to support, I would say, all these software activities. So in this area, yes, I believe the market today is seeing a huge and continuous increase of activity. And all the players in semiconductor today are investing a lot to secure capacity, to move a lot in the electrification. You know that ST is one of the leading companies in silicon carbide for the battery of the car to support, I would say, this electrification. We are investing a lot in this area, like all our competitors are doing. So now we don't see yet a slowdown in automotive, unfortunately, and you may have, like many people, have to queue again to get your car in the coming weeks.
So Bertrand, earlier you showed a graph that shows that the number of components or IC chips in the car grew 1.5x in 15 years, and another 5 years it was 2x, and you projected that after that there will be another 2x. So which means that the two things is happening. One is this rate of growth, especially with the EV coming online, and you also have the ICE engines. How are you going to balance between these two with this huge growth? I expect that ICE also will increase in the ICE chips used in the car. How do you balance between the two? And what is going to happen? Whether the capacity you put in place is going to be adequate to address this growth, tremendous growth.
Today the capacity is not adequate. I mean, you can see, because nobody is able to deliver on time the components that are requested by the car maker. I see by design, by 2030, 2035, we reduce or disappear the profit of EV at the worldwide level. So we have to follow and to, I would say, to support. A lot of car makers today are in a strategy to say, okay, we move completely to EV, because it's a huge amount of investment that they have to do, a lot of effort of R&D, a lot of effort in the design of new product, and they are launching this path. They will not reverse. I mean, this is the dispute that took place in Europe a few weeks ago when European authority was saying maybe we may reconsider. No, the guy said we cannot reconsider anymore. Now we have launched the machine. We have decided to move to the EV technology, so we will not be able to reverse. It requires too much R&D. Now to support this, we need to invest. And to invest, keeping in mind the constraint that you will address later on, which is the trade war, the decoupling of activities, the regionalization of activities, where so far everybody was working on a global economy, splitting his activity as and when. But you will have to take on top of that this consideration of where do I put my capacity, my production, in order to serve which market in China, in Europe, or in US. So far was not like that. So there is also this double challenge of reallocating, I would say, your capacity, your manufacturing footprint, in order to serve based on the new constraint, I would say, of the world trade condition.
We have time for last two questions. I will ask my last question, and you can ask yours. My last question to you is: will ST Micro consider having a fab in Malaysia? I know that you have fab in Singapore and everywhere else. Front end fab.
I mean, ST has a strategy in terms of manufacturing that is I would say, well known. First, we are a French-Italian company, so our roots are in Europe, and as such, we have announced recently, I would say, in the last few years, two big fab in Europe. One in Agrate in Milan, a 12-inch wafer fab, and another in Crolles, recently in July, with also a partner there. The other front-end footprint, as you mentioned, is in Singapore, and there is no, I would say, at that stage, any plan to diversify our front-end, I would say, footprint. At the opposite, the back-end footprint that we have in Malaysia is quite strong. We have invested a lot in the last few years with new technology, new packaging, very advanced to serve the automotive industry. We have planned, of course, to expand here our manufacturing footprint in order to support, I would say, the automotive industry. So definitely for ST, Malaysia is a strong back-end footprint in our manufacturing strategy.
Thank you. So don't mean to put you on another spot here, but I need to follow up on what the three have asked. So maybe from your expert opinion, since you're the MD of operations in Singapore, how is the ecosystem in Malaysia today? Clearly, we have a large MNC representation in terms of the back-end processing, right? So there's lots of outsourced A&T, right, in Malaysia. Do you see the climate? Do you see the landscape? Do you see the infrastructure that you have in Malaysia today be able to support that migration towards a front-end processing capability?
I cannot talk for ST because we are not concerned, but I have to say that I am in Asia since 20 years now, in Singapore, and I know very well Malaysia, the operation in Malaysia, and I have to say that I compare also a lot with Europe. I'm a French guy still, and what I can say is two things. First, when I have there are two or three things that I want to say. First one is that in Malaysia you have, like in Singapore, a strong body like MIDA to support, I would say, the electronic industry, especially the semiconductor industry. I have to say that between MIDA and EDB in Singapore, we have here in Southeast Asia, plus I3 in Taiwan, we have strong body that have the awareness of what is the need for semiconductor industry in their country. And they have done, honestly, in MIDA since many years. We are in Malaysia since 1974. We have been always working with MIDA to support our development, and I believe that MIDA, and has been explained before, has a program to support the development of semiconductor industry in Malaysia. And honestly, I mean, there are not so many countries in the world where semiconductor industry is so powerful. You have Taiwan, you have Singapore, you have Malaysia. So I think that Malaysia has all the ingredients, of course, to continue to support the development of semiconductor industry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to Abigail.
We will now proceed to our first panel session on CHIPS Act and US restrictions. To moderate this discussion, it gives me great pleasure to invite Mr. It gives me great pleasure to invite Ms. Wong Xiaoning, a radio presenter, a local radio presenter, and she does the morning run show at 6 to 10 a.m. every day. You might have heard her on your way to work. So I will now invite her on stage to moderate the first session. Please welcome. Okay, over to you, Ms. Xiaoning.
Thank you, Abby. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Like the trade war between US and China has been brewing even before the onset of the pandemic, but has now been extended to the semiconductor space. So this is exemplified by the very long name this chip bill is, actually the Creating Helpful Incentives to Produce Semiconductor and Science Act of 2022, more commonly known as the CHIPS Act, which was signed into US law in August. Now, it's a significant piece of legislation because the CHIPS Act directs $280 billion in spending over the next 10 years, with the majority of money actually directed towards scientific R&D and commercialization. Now, at the same time, the US is also expanding restrictions on China's access to semiconductor technology, citing it as part of their efforts to protect US national security and foreign policy interests. So then what are the consequences of this on the semiconductor and the chip supply chain? What will China's response be in this $600 billion industry? And is this really the start of a new cold tech war? And of course, Malaysia's role in all this. So questions we pose to our panel. Joining us is also Yan Thomas Nicholas, Executive Director specializing in semiconductors for Southeast Asia Deloitte Consulting. Sir. And remotely, we have Jimmy Goodrich, Vice President of Global Policy Semiconductor Industry Association, and Randy Abrams, Managing Director, Head of Taiwan Research and Asia Semiconductor for Credit Suisse. So I think we should start with a short reminder on the house rules. So we'll start with a short presentation by each speaker, then followed by Q&A. So do key in your questions using the QR code that was flashed or using Slido, and we'll try to get to all the questions hopefully. So in the meantime, to get us started, we have Jimmy Goodrich, of course, on remote, who leads SIA's global policy and has a diverse background in China's technology issues, making him the right person to help us set the stage as to the significance of this CHIPS Act and also all these US restrictions. Jimmy, the floor is yours.
Well, great. Thanks again to the organizers for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. I'll quickly share some of my thoughts about the dynamics that are shaping the global semiconductor industry from a geopolitical perspective, particularly the US-China dimension. Just really briefly, as the moderator mentioned, I lead SIA's global policy work, and we're the primary trade association that's representing the US semiconductor industry. In fact, we represent about 99% of US headquartered chip firms, and virtually all of them have significant operations in Malaysia and across Southeast Asia. So really important and timely topic. And a question I get asked a lot is, what does the CHIPS Act mean for Southeast Asia and Malaysia? And what does the US-China technology competition mean? I think it's a generally complicated issue that's going to bring both challenges, but also opportunities for the region. So just kind of stepping back and thinking about where we were about 5-6 years ago, globalization was still gaining steam. Companies were investing and growing, particularly in the China market across really all segments of the supply chain, manufacturing, research and development, sales. And now, fast forward 2022, the environment's gotten a lot tougher and a lot more difficult. And that's really because when you have the US and China disagreeing over many, many issues, both geopolitical, political, economic, trade issues, then critical industries like semiconductors and a few others like aerospace, biotechnology, AI, et cetera, that policymakers deem as critical for the success of their future nations. And in a competitive space like this between the US and China, unfortunately, the industry is going to kind of get thrown in with all these tensions. So the last couple of years have seen a significant increase, of course, from Washington, D.C. policymakers on China's market access challenges, civil military fusion, the concern around technology enabling Chinese military development. And that's really caught the attention of policymakers, from enacting restrictions on Huawei and ZTE to SMIC to the most recent October 7 export control rules that array a very increasing number of export controls, and everything from AI chips to semiconductor manufacturing equipment to know-how and expertise from American citizens regarding advanced technology development in the PRC. So this is a substantial increase in restrictions that the US government is seeking to impose on how US and other global chip companies do business in the China market. At the same time, the pandemic and China's strategic focus on semiconductors has reminded policymakers in Washington that they can't lose sight of their own competitiveness and need to bolster their own domestic supply chains. And during the pandemic, I heard previously the speaker from ST Micro was talking about the auto industry. When Americans were unable to buy cars, washers, and dryers, it really hit home for them around the foundational nature of semiconductors, and this galvanized political support for the CHIPS and Science Act that was passed into law this August. Key elements that are included in there are, of course, $52 billion in funding to help incentivize companies to invest in front-end and back-end manufacturing in the United States, and then a 25% refundable investment tax credit that has similar goals to make the U.S. a stable and economical environment for high-intensity investment in the semiconductor industry. The goal of the CHIPS Act, however, is not to decouple from the world, not to create a soup-to-nuts, fully independent supply chain in the United States, but to increase the resiliency of the domestic supply chain, make the U.S. a competitive location when companies are seeking to site their next advanced logic or advanced memory fabrication facility. But the U.S. is not going to be able to build everything on its own. It's going to need cooperation from companies and countries across the supply chain of research, design, front and back end, materials, chemicals, gases. So, I expect as the U.S. embarks upon this journey to incentivize more production facilities, tomorrow, President Biden's going to be in Arizona welcoming the tooling in of the new TSMC fab in Arizona. That's going to increase demand for more devices to be assembled, tested, and packaged. A lot of that's going to happen in Malaysia. That's going to increase the demand for skilled workers, for chemicals and gases across the sector. And again, the U.S. is not going to be able to onshore, reshore everything, particularly things like standard products, diodes, a lot of the analog semiconductors, trailing edge logic, just kind of difficult to see those take off in a significant way in the United States in the near future. So overall, Washington's focus and laser focus on the semiconductor industry is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's brought benefits like the CHIPS and Science Act that are going to enable a more resilient U.S. semiconductor ecosystem, particularly around front-end manufacturing, advanced logic, and memory. But on the other hand, it's also brought a deep recognition around the strategic importance of technology, which policymakers have leveraged to try and cut off access for critical semiconductor technology that might enable bad actors in China or other countries to develop this technology in nefarious ways. So all of this basically means that geopolitics are now a critical factor that are influencing business decisions, capital planning, research and development strategies for companies across the world. And when two big powers like the US and China are in a competition over strategic technology, that means third countries tend to have a very favorable position. We see a lot of companies trying to create a China plus one, China plus two strategy, and we're seeing a lot of activity in the region, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Latin America, around identifying areas to help companies bolster the resiliency of their supply chains. So there's a lot there to unpack, but I look forward to discussing more during the Q&A with my colleagues, Randy and others. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to you.
Okay, sorry about that. Jimmy, thanks for that useful update. Once again, if you have any questions for him or any of the other panelists, please use the QR code that will take you to Slido. But up next is Randy Abrams. He's the Managing Director, Head of Taiwan Research and Asia Semiconductors at Credit Suisse, who's of course also joining us remotely. His coverage includes Asian foundries, back-end tests and packaging, and also IC design companies. The floor is yours, Randy.
Okay, thank you, and happy to be back. We attended a few of the forums in the past for the Malaysia SIA, and also with Jimmy Goodrich a couple years ago, an SIA webinar, as some of these geopolitical tensions were picking up. I'm going to go through, if you can see, they're probably small to see if you're in the room, some of the slides, if you're on the Zoom screen. I'll try to go through and I'll try to walk through the key points. We can always send through the key slides later. But the approach I'm going to take, so I sit in Taiwan. I've covered both US semiconductors and also Asian semiconductors. The current role cover out of Taiwan, the Asian foundries, test and packaging, and the fabless IC design companies, and including Inari over there in Malaysia. But to go through, and I'll summarize a bit, just in the center of it, some of the implications for East Asia, so Taiwan and China. A few of the key summary points, and I'll go through slides pretty quickly. But first, just as it impacts Taiwan and TSMC with this latest round of restrictions, actually quite modest from a direct impact. When we've looked at TSMC, only low single digits is what they're producing for the component of NVIDIA or the China supercompute chips. So back to Jimmy's point, it's not really going after the mainstream commercial interests of China. A lot of the restrictions really drawn to the very high end. Even on that small impact, we've already seen the workarounds. NVIDIA launching a GPU that comes in under the spec that they can sell to China, and also for some of the China supercompute companies like Byron do have other products to offer. Just a few other points. One is where I'd say the restriction does impact China more, advanced manufacturing, advanced logic, with the restriction now moving up to 16 and below, where it will become more difficult for them to procure the tools and service for a FinFET line, and then also for memory, where now advanced DRAM and NAND flash both will be much more difficult without the US support. Now for TSMC, there's a bit of a protected opportunity now with foundries like SMIC, somewhat more restriction on FinFET. TSMC, or I'd say Samsung too, could be a platform now using nodes like 16 and 7 nanometer to produce chips that are within the guidelines. This is an area now with excess capacity in the industry, so could provide a source to backfill with some of the more advanced applications moving down to more advanced nodes. Memory from the impact to China does remove, I think, a potential oversupply issue if these restrictions don't change and China's limited on advanced DRAM and NAND flash. That does ease one of the competitive impacts we could have seen from China. I think, though, the opportunity for China, localization efforts, I'll show a couple charts later, have really accelerated. And it will play out much more on mainstream nodes. We'll also see China efforts to develop and build up self-sufficiency on more of the equipment and materials. A couple of things else I'd say we're seeing now. Right now, because we're going into a correction, we've had the COVID controls. There's been more price competition in mainland China. We've actually seen some of that price competition stay in China a bit longer. Global pricing has stayed more resilient. And so oversupply at some of the China fabs, with the bifurcation, they're more satisfying local customers. International customers are a little bit more wary for US, Europe supply, filling in to those China capacity. A couple related points I would make, though. There's another related point on geopolitical risk even for Taiwan. With what Jimmy mentioned, there's post the pandemic, the need for geographically balanced supply chain. We are seeing the Taiwan foundries, and that plays out this week. We'll have the Arizona event for TSMC. The foundries here are diversifying more of their production to follow customers' goal for multi-sourcing. So TSMC with the Arizona fab, but also have their Japan fab. UMC has a Singapore site. Vanguard also bought a site from Global Foundries. And then back to Malaysia, I think this opportunity opens up system and package and on the packaging side. I'll flip through, there's a number of slides, but just to go tight, we can always come back in Q&A. I'll just make a couple key points. One, as we talk about CHIPS Act, just think of this also a global perspective. US really joining the other regions in providing support to the industry. So this is something for the industry players, access to grants in choosing location does come out. Now I'll say though, since the US CHIPS Act, we are seeing more aggressive moves to bring production onshore. When I tie to the amounts, Jimmy laid out, and we did poll the Congress Budget Authority with their estimating outlays. It's a detailed slide, but just focus on two numbers. 25 billion by 2026 is the outlays we expect for the CHIPS Act grant, 22 billion for tax credits. So about 47 billion. If we think about that, that's about 10 billion per year, each year, could be laid out by US government. If I put it in an industry context, about 100 billion wafer fab equipment in a peak year like 2022. So the subsidy amounts to about 10% of global CapEx or global fab equipment spend. Won't all be incremental spend. If 30% is upside CapEx, it's probably an incremental few percent for the tool makers. Where it's having an impact though, table is detailed, but just want to point out a lot of the IDMs, companies like NXP, TI, ADI are looking at potential. We've seen Micron announce plans for a US site. And then also we have on here the big players, Intel, TSMC, and Samsung. And this is all part of US really trying to provide balance. Part of that is, and one of the industry concern where I sit in Taiwan, 60% foundry for Taiwan. If we take TSMC, it's actually 90% of foundry capacity, 50% of back-end packaging. And we show for TSMC 90% of their capacity in all of these different fabs, number of different products. Replacement cost of that capacity is about 170 billion, plus all those products that are already qualified in. I'll skip a couple things, but I'll show on this next chart. The Arizona expansion has quite a potential to diversify TSMC if the demand is there and customers pull them. The site they have in Arizona is as large as all the land they own in Taiwan. So quite a bit of headroom for them to expand out. Now I'll close with a few points just on China and impact. So again, it does restrict advanced memory and logic. What we've seen though since 2018, when some of the tariffs started to ramp up, China has tried to accelerate new listings on the Shanghai market. And a lot more companies have come to market really chasing after localization opportunity. That showed up in some acceleration of the growth rate, partly helped by the COVID super cycle we went through. But I would say the clear trend is the left side. These are the applications if we take things like microcontroller, basic power management chips, discretes, RF chips, CMOS sensor. These areas aren't necessarily tied in by the restriction. So I would say over the next few years, we'll continue to see China try to localize some of this. If China is 20% of global GDP, a lot of these categories where China has 5 to 10% market share, still headroom to expand into their domestic market. Areas more challenging domestically look like it's going to stay on the right side with some of the restrictions on high end. But would say with the loophole under the restriction, they can still go to TSMC or Samsung to produce some of those chips. And I'll say back to the bifurcation, the lead foundries, this is the line for local customers. We've actually seen the China foundries become much more tied to domestic with the rise in China, relatively more stable business with the international customers. And that's what their growth will come from. Reaction from China, I think we've seen it the last few years as some of the trade and tech wars picked up. This is SMIC's grants. They are getting more government support and also JV fabs to try to support that effort. Just the last two areas I'll highlight. Memory, the China analyst who covers the space still sees them attempting to do low-end DRAM and NAND flash. Very long term, they'll try to work around, but we'll go after a very low-end part of the market. It could be 10 to 15% of bits, but looks like with these restrictions, we'll stay a couple nodes behind the leaders. It's a detailed map, but where we highlight in red for the equipment supply chain, China will also try to bring up equipment companies, which have also listed. At this stage, though, where we highlight the vendors, China still has low single-digit market share. And we just conclude the direction globally in a lot of these categories, low mid-single digits. For the domestic fabs, if they're competitive enough, they are more open to using local source. And that's where we are seeing some market share gain in the domestic market. But with that, I'll come back to hand it back to the moderator, and then we can go into more detail in the Q&A part.
Okay, thanks, Randy, for that very comprehensive presentation. Now, the last panelist for this session is Jan Thomas Nicholas, the gentleman on my left, Executive Director for Deloitte Consulting. Now, he leads Deloitte's semiconductor consulting practice in Southeast Asia. So I suppose you're the right person to tell us the impact of these restrictions and the CHIP Act that has had and will continue to have on ASEAN. Should we be optimistic or pessimistic? Jan, your views, please.
Thanks. So I always enjoy discussions with Jimmy and Randy. I've been in several events where they've presented. This is my first time in a panel with them, and I appreciate that we hear quite a bit about policy and the direction of policy. We hear quite a bit about near-term microeconomics and what's happening in the industry. To add to that, I'd like to provide just a little bit of thought around how to frame the strategic imperatives for companies and how they can respond to this, what they need to be thinking about. So if you think from a Chinese manufacturing perspective, there are certain things that become very, very important to you immediately. So the first is, of course, access to product. And that's something that Randy's talking about. And starting with ZTE several years ago, Chinese companies have begun stockpiling inventories, have begun thinking about what shortages would mean, and have really started thinking strategically about that. But medium term to long term, what's happened is the US has just signaled that they're willing to use access to technology as a weapon in the trade war. And so that means that non-US IP suddenly becomes extremely valuable. That if you're a company in China, finding partners, finding sources of products, or finding non-US IP becomes incredibly important. And so I anticipate that will drive some activity in the industry. Now, the avenues for M&A may be limited to Chinese companies because of policies in Europe and the US, but tie-ups with whether they're joint ventures or M&A or other partnerships with non-US companies or companies that have non-US IP may be very attractive. Another thing that's an imperative to China is to slip the stranglehold that the US has on IP. And the US has a lot of IP in design. It's got a lot of design libraries. It's got a lot of IP around capital equipment. And it's got a lot of IP on silicon-based legacy technologies. And so I remember in the 1990s when China was first opening up, and Western media analysts were saying, how could China's economy skyrocket? They don't even have a good landline phone network to communicate. And China, of course, leapfrogged all of them by going directly to mobile communications. And so when you look from a Chinese strategic perspective and strategic technology investment, I expect long-term for China to invest very heavily in competing technologies. I expect all the discussions that we've been having around quantum computing and around alternative technologies to be advanced, and for China to have their own, for them to have their own moonshot program to be able to get around these US restrictions. And I think that from a non-Chinese company perspective, it's very important to recognize where you have US IP embedded in your products. I've spoken with quite a few companies in the last few months, and I've heard many times, I don't have any US IP in my products. And I ask, well, do you use Synopsys? do you have any design libraries that you rely on? And so people don't have a real good understanding of where the US IP lands and where it doesn't. Second thing is that people tend to think very narrowly about their exposure to this. And they say, I don't make a product that is restricted by these rules, therefore I don't need to worry about them. But unfortunately, all of us build products that go into integrated technologies, that go into other things. And so if any component in your supply chain is affected by this, you will be. And we've heard a lot from ST earlier about how semiconductors are a small but increasing part of the value of a car. But we also heard we heard from Jimmy that restricted the US ability to manufacture. And I think we'll see the same thing where there will be technologies, there will be US IP, we haven't uncovered them yet, but there will be strategic decisions around limiting the downside of this based on, maybe not on your products, but based on the other products that go into your customers' designs. And the third thing is to think carefully about where you may have value to either Chinese or non-Chinese companies for those joint ventures or for partnerships or for technology development. Now, getting back to Malaysia, which is the question you asked, given that strategic framework, what's the value here? Well, one thing is that we have IP developers and we have design entrepreneurs here in Malaysia that are developing non-US IP. And given that Malaysia straddles both sides of that and that Malaysia is non-aligned, that becomes very valuable for those entrepreneurs. So I'd say that's an opportunity for people who are inventive that want to create their own companies. If you can create your own IP libraries that you can then sell and license, that's a fantastic opportunity. As Randy and Jimmy mentioned, for all the investment that's going to go into Europe and all the investment that's going to go into the US, they do not have the capability and the capacity to assemble and test all that volume. And from a policy perspective, I do not expect that the US will invest billions of dollars into wafer fabs to create chips that will then be tested in mainland China. So I anticipate that the risk that people see geopolitically from mainland China and from Taiwan right now will squeeze assembly and test into the few places that remain that can do it at scale. And that's Korea and that's Southeast Asia. And when you look at how Western companies align with assembly and test providers, mostly they look to Southeast Asia. So Malaysia is very well positioned for that. We mentioned that between 13 and 14% of assembly and test capacity worldwide is here in Malaysia. And that's a fantastic, it's a fantastic landing ground for all of that. Now, what would Malaysia need to do to capitalize on this? Well, we asked about whether or not there would be more wafer fabs in Malaysia, but the US CHIPS Act doesn't necessarily support building of wafer fabs here. We're not really going to see a follow-on effect there, but for assembly and test we could. And the question is, how much additional value add can we create in assembly and test? Where can we do advanced packaging? Where can we do things that enable incremental gains above Moore's law through packaging that would be very attractive to the people that receive the US investments? I think that's a big question. Another big question is, can Malaysia scale a talented, trained workforce in order to get its fair share? Because Malaysia is very well positioned to absorb a lot of this volume, but can we stand up the people? Can we stand up the scale? Scale is always a question that people have when they talk about mainland China. One of the main things that you hear when Apple says that they're going to shift production out of China, the first question anybody asks is, where are you going to find 200,000 people? And it's a fair question. Now, Malaysia can't immediately conjure up hundreds of thousands of people, but there are policies and incentives that Malaysia has to develop STEM education and to provide more. And I think that's one of the key questions for Malaysia, is can Malaysia create the scale to get its fair share? If not, there are other players in the world that would like to participate. You hear India is having a lot of incentives. You hear other geographies making a lot of incentives. I was surprised to see you guys have something in Morocco. That's impressive. There are other geographies that would love to have some of that if Malaysia's not able to create the people or create the scale in the workforce. So I think the main questions for Malaysia is, will Malaysia be able to capture its fair share of this? Can it increase the value add in the back end that it should get anyway, and be able to create more economic value and make that more accretive to value? And can it sustain that workforce growth that it needs to? So that to me is the positioning for Malaysia. And on top of that, on the side is, how can our entrepreneurs create more IP that's valuable around the world that's not linked to the US? Thanks.
Thank you. That was Yan Thomas Nicholas, Executive Director specializing in semiconductors for Southeast Asia, Deloitte Consulting. So
one small thing.
One more.
My mom called me Jan.
Jan, apologies about that. So looks like we need to create more intellectual property rights within Malaysia and have that talent pool. But it's time also for Q&A. And to get the ball rolling, let me ask the first question, and I'm going to ask Jimmy. Now, I want to go back to the CHIPS Act, which, unusually received bipartisan support in the US. But realistically, what are the challenges of onshoring again for the US? I'm sure there are some headwinds that it will face.
Yeah, so obviously this is a historic piece of legislation. It's probably the largest experiment industrial policy that the United States has done in decades, really since something like the Apollo or the Manhattan Project. So the stakes are really high to get this right, and everyone knows it's not going to be easy. It's going to require the U.S. Commerce Department to bring on board a lot of expertise from Wall Street, from Washington, D.C., from the industry, to help them think about, how do you implement a program? Who do you choose to receive the grants and how much? All really important questions. We know that, for example, while the money is really important, it's not the only factor to creating a competitive ecosystem. Our workforce, for example, we don't have the pipeline of workers, short and longer term, potentially to help build out the fabs and the facilities that we need. Investment in research development is still really important, because if you want to lead in manufacturing process technology, it really requires a dedication to advanced node research and development. And then beyond that, the supply chain is really important. The US almost had a railway strike, still has congestion in the ports in Los Angeles. If we're going to be importing massive amounts of semiconductor gases, chemicals, equipment, parts, and components to fuel the expansion of manufacturing, our logistics infrastructure needs to keep pace. I think beyond that also, we need the states, the local governments, to think competitively around how are they going to help assist the federal government and these companies build out a semiconductor ecosystem. We've already seen actually a lot of innovative thinking from states like Arizona, Texas, Oregon, and thinking about how to create clusters, partnerships with universities. So we have a lot of work to do, but the good news is it's already starting. There's a lot of activity now around the CHIPS Act. No one ever said it's going to be easy, but I'm optimistic around the future that this is going to bring.
All right, thanks. Now, I have a question for Randy, and this is really about Taiwan, because I think no other country is impacted more by the chip war than Taiwan, of course. So after all, foundries run by semiconductor giant TSMC produce somewhat 54% of global chip supply. So how is Taiwan responding? And, I read something about the Chip 4 Alliance. Can you help us understand what this means?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Taiwan's response, there is some recognition that they need to, if they're going to maintain the stronghold that they've had in the industry, that they need to let their companies do some degree of diversification. Before, and I'll take a historical context, they were a bit careful with China in terms of transferring N technology. It was always N-1. Direction now, I think, with the approaches is really not getting in the way of what TSMC has been doing with the move to Japan, the move to Arizona. And part of it gets back to that silicon shield. We still take the perspective, and for Taiwan, even if TSMC moves 25-30% of the capacity in the next 5 years, and that would mean they have a mega fab in Arizona, they build out Japan, they still have a bit over 5% in China. They'll still have 70% of their capacity in Taiwan. They'll still have 4 mega fabs doing advanced products there. So I think that's where I would say for Taiwan, they don't need to necessarily be overly worried about losing the shield. It does allow some balance. I think what it gets the US companies is it saves a lot of the qualification time. Technically, if there's a disruption and products are qualified, it could be a year start to get things qualified. At least you save that step by having a mega fab in the US. Now back to support, Taiwan is trying to keep the companies competitive. They know Samsung, Intel will get subsidies, Global Foundries with their overseas fabs. The biggest action we've seen recently are additional tax credits. And Taiwan's traditionally, TSMC's traditionally had a 10% or so tax rate. Some of those credits have gradually been expired, but it looks like with the new programs, could keep these tax rates quite competitive, down to about 10%. I think the other piece for Taiwan is it's been constrained on water resource, energy. But when we've noticed things like the drought or on some of the energy crunch, they have made sure to prioritize semiconductors. And that's where we've seen, even in an area where we have these periodic problems, didn't see any major outbreaks come out from some of the shortages. So they will provide that industrial support and prioritization to the industry. Chips 4, and this might be one Jimmy I think might also go to provide a bit on. But our view, I think, with part of this is really a more coordinated effort in terms of for U.S. and almost a U.S. plus one, but rely on trusted allies for good support, good semiconductor assurance. And that's where to bring in allies like Japan, Taiwan, Korea, go along, I think, on some of the policies, but also to assist in some of the support of a trusted, reliable source of semiconductors.
Right. I've got a question from the floor, and it's for you, Jan. And it's about the policy. So we know what we are short of. We're short of human talent in Malaysia, the need to create intellectual property. But do we have the policies in place for that to grow, or at least foster a kind of environment for it?
It's a good question. So we tend to stay away from pronouncements about internal politics or domestic politics. And me personally, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I'm a guest here in Malaysia, and it's never a good thing to come to someone else's house and talk about how they run it. I will say that Malaysia has some very favorable policies for investment. That obviously, empirically, when you see that Malaysia is overweight in terms of their contribution to the semiconductor industry. If you were to say, or Malaysia's population as a percentage of world population versus Malaysia's impact of the industry as a percentage of world impact is very, very favorable on a per capita basis. That said, every country in the world is struggling to find enough microchip engineers. And part of what's happened, we alluded to this, is that the returns to higher education for going to financial services have been much, much higher. And I'm a great example of this. I'm a chip engineer. I have a chemical engineering degree, And I did PECVD research for AMD in Silicon Valley earlier on in my career, and here I am in management consulting, right? As opposed to turning wrenches on tools in a fab. And so part of the challenge is, I believe, finding the people inside the country that see working in the semiconductor industry as the step up for them and the next step. And I'll share a personal anecdote to illustrate this, and that is that my family was relatively poor. I was the first generation from my family to go to university. My brother and I both studied engineering. He's a helicopter engineer at Boeing, and I became a microchip engineer. And for us, that was a fantastic opportunity. And there are children in Malaysia right now who will see the step up as the right opportunity, as you said, if we educate them, if we bring this to them and say that this is the path for you. You may not get the middle class and upper middle class students who can study STEM and say, I want to become a doctor, or I want to go into investment banking. I want to start my own hedge fund. But if you can get to the people that say, being a microchip engineer is so much better than what my family has ever had, you can reach them and you can do that. And I think that's the key to the policies that we need to do, is we need to think about where do we have untapped resources, because Malaysia has a lot of really smart, really entrepreneurial people. And you can see that every single day in your life, that there are Malaysians that you see as you're doing your everyday business that are being innovative in how they take care of their family, how they take care of their work, how they take care of their business. But so we have that spirit, we have that intelligence. What we need to do is transform that into that larger workforce.
Even here in Malaysia, we wonder what we can do with STEM, right? How to make it a career of choice. And that's, I think, a challenge, I think, not only in Malaysia, but even in the US with this CHIPS Act, because labor shortage is a real major problem. But I've got a question for you, Randy, and it's maybe you can expand it beyond just Malaysia, because the question is, would we then see a slowdown in capacity building? So CAPEX expansion by OSAT players in Malaysia or this region, given the CHIPS Act and geopolitical tension between China and Taiwan?
I think for OSAT building, don't necessarily see a slowdown. I mean, I'd actually say there's project activity, and I was just at our US annual tech conference, and I think there's still, especially for the established US, Europe chip companies, desire for some diversification. But we've also seen in covering companies like ASE and to a lesser extent Emcee, I think they are still hesitant about high volume package and test in the US. Partly gets back to, I think, some of the concerns Jen mentioned about the labor shortage, but that's still a sensitivity, labor and also cost, whether it's as economic. There's also the issue of the hardware contract manufacturing largely is staying, if it's China plus one, will likely be more in Vietnam or in places like India. So we're actually seeing for OSAT assembly and test, some regionalization, some move, I'd say, from China, Taiwan over time. That gets back to the point, ASE still 85% of their capacity in Taiwan. But even their direction could be around other places in the region. And so as we see some fab capacity, it won't all be toward US, but as we see some go to US, to Europe, but also Singapore as a site, that also creates a better hub for Malaysia. And Singapore, we would highlight Global Foundries, UMC, both have fab projects there. So there is that opportunity. Vanguard has another project as a foothold. So our sense, we will have some regionalization from Taiwan, China that creates opportunity for Malaysia.
All right. Now, a question for Jimmy, actually. Now, I can see the CHIPS Act and all these restrictions. Definitely, there's some benefits to the US economy from the reshoring, but there are going to be trade-offs. Immediately coming to mind is the potential rise in costs, as it will be likely to be more expensive along the value chain now. So at the end of the day, is the consumer the ultimate loser in all this?
So I think overall, well, yes, the US is more expensive to build and operate advanced node 300 millimeter fabrication facilities. In fact, we did a study in 2020 that said overall, the 10-year total cost of ownership of building and operating a fab in the US compared to Asia is about 40% higher. But the goal of the CHIPS Act is to address that. The goal is to leverage tax credits and government grants to close that cost gap, to make it level on a equal on a level playing field with other countries across the region. And if you look at particularly in the advanced nodes, labor as the cost of your facility over 10 years is actually not the determinant factor. It's generally your materials, your equipment, and most of that is the same price in Japan, Taiwan as it is in the United States. You're talking about the same finished equipment, same finished gases and chemicals that are coming in. You might have some higher logistics and installation costs, but overall, I think those can be managed. And already we're seeing, for example, that customers are willing to potentially pay a slight premium to access those facilities in the US. As again, I mentioned TSMC, Tim Cook from Apple, Lisa Su from AMD are going to be at the signing ceremony, I think in a strong sign that they're willing to leverage some of these assets here in the United States, particularly for premium, high value add, say enterprise grade server networking products where price is already quite high to begin with. I think there'll be a higher degree of receptivity to use onshore manufacturing. Again, it may not work for everything. Low value add assembly test, 65, 90 nanometer PMICs, probably not. But for the leading edge, I think there'll be a opportunity to do so.
Can I just add something to that?
Please.
It's a fantastic answer. I just wanted to build on it a little bit. And that is that one of the benefits of globalization is that it enables specialization and enables resources and capital to flow where they're most efficiently used. And so as we swing away from globalization, prices will increase for all of these products. And some of the things that I anticipate is not just that prices will go up for products made in the US, but think about it from a Chinese perspective. I mean, one of the reasons why everybody wants leading edge chips, leading edge nodes, is because they pack a lot of compute power in a very small space. They're very energy efficient, and they're very, very small. So you use them in things like mobile phones where you need very, very small device footprint, very good battery use, which enables a smaller battery. It enables a lot of things. Now, if China is limited in their ability to produce chips below 16 nanometers, then they're not going to have the access to advanced nodes. So think about what happens to mobile phones in China, is that they have to have larger batteries, they have to have greater footprint. Now true, if you get on the subway in Shanghai and everybody's got a massive screen mobile phone anyway, right? So maybe the footprint is not a big thing, but what you'll see is that the overall material cost for all these things will go up anyway. And so the fact that we're regionalizing our supply chains is going to drive higher costs. Now, is it going to be differentially more in the US versus in China versus elsewhere? Is it just that the cost of all these products is going to go up and the consumer is worse off than they would have been under globalization? We don't know. But I think that saying, will consumers be willing to pay more for a product than they were in the past? I don't think they have any choice. That as the supply chains diverge and as they regionalize, instead of globalizing, prices for all electronic equipment is going to go up as a result.
Okay. Randy, I've got a question for you actually. And it is, what options does China have to overcome the restrictions imposed on them and the CHIPS Act? Because currently I read they're only 12% self-sufficient.
Yeah, so I'll say the options for China, I go back to they will try to do whatever they can to go around. We look after the Huawei restriction. It's not an immediate fix, but there are efforts in China to eventually get to a line which is absent of US equipment and technology. And I'd say their effort now, they know they're quite far from 16 nanometer and below, more like a 2840, get to the point as a start to be able to develop homegrown process technology. And so this is a project that's many years. Where we'll see the development is China's nascent equipment industry, where there are several listed companies now, low to mid single digit industry share. Their opportunity will be, if they're good enough, supply the domestic China foundries. And that's how they're going to build up the scale and know-how, at least to be able to do mature technology. Same effort on wafer, where they've started with 6 and 8 inch, and then gradually moving toward 12-inch bare wafer. So I think for China they have to be patient with it. Start with that area. And then I would say there are other opportunities in mass market where they're not restricted. It will be to go after those, localize if it's competitive, use local source. And then one other option for China is really the design community. If it's not a high performance AI supercompute chip, they will access overseas foundries as long as they're not restricted. And so that is still a channel for TSMC if it's doing a mobile chip. There's nothing in the restriction or for autonomous driving to still develop chips for those applications. So you will see China's efforts just using overseas fabs for those products.
And Jan, since you're next to me, I'm going to put you on the spot. And do we dare ask, what is a potential black swan event that could change the trajectory of this tech Cold War, even accelerate it?
Good question. So first off, we've all been talking about it from a U.S. policy perspective, and going back to 5 years ago when all this started, there was a tit for tat acceleration or expansion in restrictions where the US would announce something and China would come back and announce something, and the US would ban certain people from financial trade, and China would say the same thing, that people are not welcome in China. But this last US announcement happened in October, right before the National People's Congress, when they wanted to make sure that all the news was celebratory around the progress of the company and the renomination of Xi Jinping. And so we didn't see an announcement of China's retaliation. And right now, China's a little bit distracted by other things that are happening, so we haven't seen that. But I anticipate that China will not allow something like this to stand without some level of retaliation. And so the industry needs to be prepared that at some point in the future, China will announce their response to this. Now, they did denounce it in the media, but they didn't change any policies. And so that will happen. And so the question is, how does that then destabilize the industry further? And what decisions do people make? For 30 years, the industry has been relatively boring and has been relatively safe.
Boring can be good.
Yeah,
very
exactly.
profitable.
Exactly. And so for the last 5 years, it has not been boring at all. And so when you talk about this, that uncertainty that companies have and that countries have creates the opportunity for these black swan events. So I can't predict with my crystal ball what it will be, but there are a handful of things that could really change the trajectory of things. One would be Chinese retaliation and seeing how that spins up. Another would be if India can convince a major champion to come in. If you think about what happened with Vietnam wanted a chip industry for years. Intel came in, and Intel has the ability to tell all their suppliers, you will move to Vietnam and support me. If India finds a national champion that can stand up at that scale, that can force the supply base, that can force things, they can also change because they have a lot of scale and they can build. It'll take them years. But there are other things like that are completely unanticipated that people may follow.
Okay, maybe one last question for Jimmy, and it's a question about free trade and the freedom of movement of people, because the US restrictions also extend to their citizens who work for domestic Chinese chip companies. I think the Wall Street reported that at least 43 senior executives work with 16 publicly listed Chinese semiconductor companies. Now, is withholding talent and restricting private individuals actually fair?
So that's a great question. As you pointed out, the new October 7 export control rules not only apply to US exports, but also US persons. Could be an individual holding a passport or a green card, or subsidiaries of US companies in countries like Malaysia. from supporting entities in China that are developing technology below certain thresholds. And as Randy pointed out, the thresholds are 16 nanometer for logic, 18 nanometer for DRAM, several different types of manufacturing equipment, and 128 layer and above 3D NAND flash technology. So this is not a blanket ban on all US citizens from supporting China's technology. It's really the most advanced nodes. And primarily, our understanding is that the US government was really trying to target the subsidiaries, overseas subsidiaries of US companies, which is why they did this, quote, US persons rule. But I think they found out that there was a bit of unintended consequences here, a bit of chaos, because surprisingly, most policymakers in Washington are not aware of this, that most of the leadership, the CTOs, the vice presidents, the CFOs, the general managers of Chinese semiconductor companies carry American passports. And so this set off a bit of a deep level of concern within China that they'd be vulnerable, because we talk about the talent shortage in the United States. China, too, even though it has 1.3 billion people, faces its own talent shortage, particularly around highly experienced and trained management. So I think the jury is still out on whether or not this is going to have a significant impact. I think we saw a lot of overreaction initially to the rules when they came out, 137 pages, hard to fully digest that in 24 hours. And we're seeing companies recalibrate their responses. But certainly it's going to send a chill, I think, across the supply chains. And a number of Americans are concerned about whether or not they could continue working in China. Thankfully, the US Commerce Department did issue a clarification to some of their rules. They narrowed the scope of those US person restrictions, but it was kind of deep on the Commerce Department website. Not sure if everybody picked up on it. And there may be some future adjustments moving forward. So again, I think this caused a stir, created a lot of commotion, but overall the impact may actually be more limited than what's been anticipated.
All right. On that note, we have unfortunately run out of time, but I do want to thank our panel, Jim Goodrich, Vice President of Global Policy at Semiconductor Industry Association, Randy Abrams, Managing Director, Head of Taiwan Research and Asia Semiconductors at Credit Suisse, and Jan Thomas Nicholas, Executive Director specializing in semiconductors for Southeast Asia, Deloitte Consulting, for their valuable insights on the CHIPS Act and US restrictions. Abby, over to you.
So ladies and gentlemen, we will now adjourn for a 15-minute intermission or tea break, if you will. And we will come back here to continue with our final and second session in 15 minutes. So I will see you back here at 11:30. Thank you. I'd like to invite everyone to kindly take your place. So we will now proceed with the second and final panel discussion on sustainability in the E&E industry. And to moderate this session, I'd like to once again invite Ms. Wong Xiaoning to moderate. Please welcome.
Thank you, Abby. I think I'd like to start by actually inviting the rest of the panelists onto the stage, please. Bishi, Ibrahim, KB, would you like to join me, please? I'll introduce you formally in a minute, but please. It's okay. It's free sitting here. All right, now that we are comfortably seated, now I think, so welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our second panel discussion on sustainability in the E&E industry. Now, we all know COP27 just concluded in Egypt, with global leaders agreeing to a novel loss and damage fund Although there was a little bit of pessimism that only 26 out of 193 countries had tightened pledges for 2030 emission reduction. But I think what was very interesting about COP27 is that this time round, the private sector took a major role at this conference, particularly across the areas of climate ambition, low carbon technology, and climate adaptation. So the question is, how do companies intend to integrate sustainability into their businesses, especially in the E&E industry? So to discuss this, our panelists, Vishwana Ramasamy, General Manager and VP at Western Digital in Penang. He's replacing his colleague KL Bok. Ibrahim Arifin, Senior Manager, Climate Change and Sustainability Services at EY Consulting. He's also replacing Arina Kok, who unfortunately cannot make it today. We have joining us remotely is Dr. Musami Bhatt. She's Vice President of Sustainability Programs at SEMI, which is a trade association. And finally, to my left, KB Chan, Senior Advisor, Delivery Center of Excellence, Global Sales Learning and Development at Dell Technologies. So before we start, just another reminder in terms of the house rules. I'm going to start with a short presentation by each speaker, then followed by Q&A. So do key in your questions using the QR code that was flashed earlier that will take you to Slido, and we'll try to get to all the questions at the end. Now, I do want to start with you, Vishy. So, you're a dynamic supply chain professional, innovative technologies, who's leading the transformational efforts at Western Digital's Malaysia solid state drive storage operations, right? So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Xiaoning, and thank you to the MSIA team, Dato Sri S.H. Wong, and the rest of the team, and also a warm welcome to the fellow panelists. And hi, Mosami, good to see you on Zoom. So yeah, I have a prepared presentation where I'll walk you through some of our journey for Western Digital in terms of sustainability as it pertains to the E&E industry. Actually, we're very excited because just recently, in the past year, we were designated by the World Economic Forum as Asia's first sustainability lighthouse, and also Malaysia. So we're excited to share some of our commitments, some of our challenges, our approach, and how we went about this, right? And our journey is kind of getting started. We're not done, despite all the accolades and all the recognition along the way. So Western Digital is committed. It's in the long haul in terms of commitment for our sustainability, Scope 1 and Scope 2. We are committing 42% reduction based on 2020 targets, and this has been vetted by the Science-Based Targets Initiative, as well as we're also working on a 50% reduction of our emissions on Scope 3, right? So that's a little bit of a challenge, and I'll speak a little bit about that. And we hope to achieve both of these commitments by 2030. So that's our goal based on 2020 commits, right? When we look at Western Digital's approach has been holistic or 360 degrees in nature. We look at how we can create value or shared value for both our customers, ourselves, our businesses, and also the community at large, right? So with this focus on sustainability, we think we'll be able to lead to more efficient and resilient business operations. This was also demonstrated through the pandemic, where we had some challenges through the supply chain. We obviously want to meet our customers' goals or customers' targets as well from an efficiency perspective. So that's a prime also focus for us. But also with a lot of this, and I'll talk a little bit about that, how we go about it in terms of the digital transformation that was achieved on site. It also helps reduce risks of, whether it's legal liabilities, misconducts, more transparencies in our operations. So that's one of the added benefits that we see from all of this as well. And we also are able to increase our investor pool, add value to our stakeholders. And I mentioned this earlier in terms of enhancing the supply chain, making it more resilient, making it more digitized, right? But last but not least, with doing all of this, we actually are able to improve the health and well-being of everyone in the community, and that's more important in terms of the planet and the future that holds, right? So the challenges, as we've gone on this journey, we've kind of encountered a lot of challenges from an economic perspective, environmental perspective, and social perspective. From an economic perspective, I think we had kind of a perfect storm, if you will, in the last few years. We had the pandemic, where there was actually a demand surge. I think to Bernard's presentation earlier, there was a shift from automotive to more of working from home, technology-driven consumer usage and consumer shift. So that increased and put pressure on the supply chain. But to add to that, then we quickly shifted gears to some of the conflicts that we see today, geopolitical transitions that are happening, as well as inflationary pressures that put a negative pressure in terms of our demand moving forward. So, but despite all those challenges that we see, whether it's inflationary or demand drops, but I think those are all very short term. We still believe that the industry will continue to grow. In fact, McKinsey had a study out that we're expecting storage to grow at about 25%, in the coming years. So with that growth, with storage growth, there's going to be a lot of technology that's going to be introduced. We typically in the storage industry, whether it's flash or HDD, we have nodal transitions. We go from one node to another, where we actually build more capacity per node. Likewise, on the HDD side as well, we also do the same, right? So with all of this, what happens is there's a lot of demand put on the operations. So the increased volume translates into increased energy consumption, increased waste, if you will, and then also increased water usage, right? So there is actually a need. The need of the hour is how do you make your operations more energy friendly? How do you generate less waste, and how do you consume or recycle and reduce, reuse, recycle, and remanufacture, if you will. Last but not least is a social aspect. I think we are in this frame of the industry where you typically go into an operations and you ask somebody about sustainability, they look at their EHS team, right? Because typically you're used to the EHS team, the environmental health and safety team, to come up with things. But we want to change this paradigm a little bit, where opportunity to improve our sustainability footprint is a shared ownership for all levels of the organization, including an operator on the production floor, right? You've got to think about, how do I reduce waste? How do I improve things around me? And then when you look at it from the 17 SDGs that are there, things like how do you improve the health and well-being? How do you improve poverty? Those are things that you do not need to be in operations to help. So we have that responsibility to the planet and to our community, and that's one of the things that we want to shift the awareness from, just being single-minded in the way we look at things, right? So how do we do it? We focus on we've got three tracks that we focus on: climate change, green practices, and carbon emission. I'll touch on a few in the interest of time. The climate change, what we typically look at is we try to drive our test is a big part of our operations or our technology changes, whether it's the flash or the hard drive. So we try to reduce our energy consumption per terabyte or per petabyte of storage that we produce. So that's a big focus for us. And that's when we look at whether we can reduce our test times, whether we can eliminate any kind of unnecessary tests, because for those in operations, test is always considered a non-value add operation, but we need to do that to protect our customer quality and reliability. So that's where we continue to invest a lot of time and energy. We're also looking at, from a design perspective, how do we design out some of the energy consumptions in our product so that our energy footprint is greatly reduced. We also have efforts in terms of the IIoT using the sensors. In fact, that's one of the things that we've spent a lot of time in terms of our facilities. How does the facilities use sensors to predict and prescribe less energy consumption as we build more product out? And that's one of the challenges that we will see as we continue to grow. From a green practice perspective, Western Digital has a recycling program. We actually accept some of our products back, and then with that we've also been able to minimize the amount of wastage that's happening as well. In our Thailand facility, we reduced close to about 45 tons of wastage in the landfill, right? Carbon emission, I think you've heard the recent announcements from local bodies, whether it's TNB. There's a CGPP program. That's one of the opportunity, and in addition to the RECs. But I think what we need to start thinking about is, in addition to the natural, the opportunity to get recycled energy, how do we reduce our, how do we use automation to reduce our overall footprint in terms of our energy consumption footprint? So that's a big focus for us. And last but not least, when I talked about scope 3, how do we make our supply chain resilient enough where we can actually shift from shipping by air to shipping by ocean? Bring in more automation. We don't need that many transportation. When we first started up our facility, we had 70% direct labor, so we have to transport them all over Penang Island, right? But in this case, we can cut short our DL footprint, so we can minimize our transportation footprint as well. So those are some of the things that we are looking at. So key takeaways, we still strongly believe that digitization is at the heart of sustainability, and we will need to continue to accelerate areas that are still very manual in nature across all of Western Digital operations. How can we digitize it? How can we use IIoT more? How can we transition more to lights out manufacturing? How can we start, we have something called the digital twin, where we mimic everything in our production facilities around the globe in a digital medium. How do we build that simulation ability so that we reduce our overall footprint? And last but not least, people are still at our core, people are still at our foundation, and that's one of the things that we will continue to focus on in terms of developing the knowledge base and driving the next generation of solutions at Western Digital and also to our community at large.
All right, thank you very much. That was Vishy Ramaswamy, General Manager and VP at Global Flash Back-End Operations Western Digital in Penang. I think what's interesting is that technology is important, but the people are even more important, and the need to empower them. And it's not just a top-down approach, but a bottom-up one as well. So up next, we have Ibrahim Arifin, Senior Manager, Climate Change and Sustainability Services at EY Consulting. Now, I understand your experience is mainly in emphasis on ESG strategy. You help companies implement it. Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wong. First of all, thank you, MSI, for inviting us to be part of these delightful events, and thank you. Much delighted as well to be in the presence of all the great panelists in the floor and on virtually. So first of all, I would say that this ESG have become more heightened focus over the past 2-3 years, especially like post-pandemics, in which we have seen a lot of crises, especially to manage all the carbon, climate change, as well as the impact on the geopolitical impact to the supply chains. So maybe you can turn on the slides. So it's not integrating ESG into businesses. It's not really a walk in the park. So as also shared by Vishy also just now, that you see that there are a lot of initiative already be in place, but most of it, like for example, the carbon emission reporting, in particular for Malaysia landscape, is quite a new things. And to understand the scope 1 and scope 2 is rather relatively easier, as it is more in terms of our direct and indirect emissions. But when it comes to scope 3, it's totally a whole new areas in which we'll need to look into whole value chains as well as the supply chains. So a lot of people may ask that, is the ESG going to be a mainstay? Is ESG is really a sustainable long-term value creations? And hence, we will start to dive into what's the local trends and as well as how business can transit into this ESG transition, taking into opportunities to make sure that the business remain resilient. So maybe we can go to the, okay. So with regards to the, I just skip to the trends. So if you see that over the past decades, we have see the global risks have shifted mainly from economic risks, and now they are start focusing on the climate risk as well. So if you see from 2022 perspective, 3 out of 5 of the global risks is dwell within the environmental concerns. If you see that, for example, due to the climate change, there are a lot of disruption within the supply chains and impact to the social life as well. Taking into the Malaysia local context as well, a lot of manufacturing facilities are also affected due to the recent floodings, for example. And aside from businesses, this also impacts social life and ultimately will also impact the economic supports that need to mitigate all the impacts from the flood incidents, for example. So one of the main concerns is on the climate action failures, extreme weather, biodiversity loss. And when talking about biodiversity loss, it's not really just focusing on the environmental per se, but it also will affect, for example, our food security eventually. And in addition to the top 5, the 2 others are more focusing on the social impacts. So if you see from this one, that the rise of the ESG risk as one of the top 5 global risks require business to manage this risk for long-term resilience. So aside from just addressing the economic value of the organizations, they need to see what are the values that the company able to give to the community and to the nation as well as the global agenda. So if we base on some surveys done with the C-suites over 1,000 companies across sectors, so we see that the long-term values have put one of the key items for businesses. And in particular, if you're focusing on manufacturing sectors per se is see that the long-term values are the most important things and the topic discussed among the C-suites level. And if you're looking on the long-term values, manufacturing is superseding all other sectors with regards to recognizing the importance of long-term value creations. And same goes for climate risk. Manufacturing comes second after the energy. And ultimately, I would say the energy with regards to these decarbonizations, like usually the power sector is deemed as the critical sectors to decarbonize all other sectors, as shared by Mr. Vishy also just now, that, for example, renewable energy supply is one of the key things in terms of decarbonizing the businesses. So in order to achieve the enhanced sustainability, these are the few things that have been strategy that have the manufacturing companies look into. And if you see from the 5 items, it's not extensive, but I would say that these are the top 5 initiatives taken by manufacturing sectors. It covers the internal perspective as well as the external perspective. Like when we're talking about sustainable factory design, this is more in terms of what we internally can do. This also include the more responsibly of resource utilizations, better energy management within the operations of the facilities, and also how we manage the waste and water, for example. And the other things is more in terms of anticipating what's the market look into, like for example, the sustainable materials. Like give an example from the real property development sectors, giving examples. Like currently, a lot of footprints are coming from the cement, the steel making, for example. And now they are looking into more sustainable and some alternative materials that are able to manage their carbon footprints. So with regards to this, a lot of sectors also are looking into these sustainable materials in terms of how they want to manage their own emissions. Digital manufacturing, as well as this also in terms of how we want to optimize our resources, as well as enhance the efficiency of our operations. Circularity and sustainable logistics, these are also some of the areas that a lot of manufacturing companies are looking into, in particular to manage their resource utilizations. This also just give an examples, a bit of deliberations with regards to the sustainable factory designs. These are the 3 contexts that they are looking into. So if you see that from the Malaysia landscape itself, that I would say that renewable energy is not really much of a talk last decades, but nowadays a lot of companies are approaching the energy sectors, power sector, in terms of how the power sector, for example, the utility Tenaga Nasional Berhad, how they are able to provide clean energy for their operations. So implementation of energy efficiency technologies, optimizing process to improve factory utilizations are some of the key strategies that companies are looking into. Next, on the sustainable sourcing. I think, okay. Sustainable sourcing, these are the two things. One on the alternative low carbon materials that they are looking into. And the next one, especially anticipating from what happened during the pandemic seasons, they are revising their supply chains, relook on their supply chains, and they are identifying what's the nearshoring supply chains that they are able to, in case there are further situations coming in the near future. Ultimately, that companies are focused on digitalizations and agility to fundamentally transform their supply chains. And these are the 5 areas that they are need to ask within the internal companies itself, how they want to redefine the supply chain strategy, what are their risk factors, what are the opportunities that arise from all these current situations, how they want to design and build agility into the supply chain footprints, optimize the working capital profile. And this also goes back to the manpower as well as the capital allocations for sustainability initiative. Embrace sustainability, and when we're talking about embracing sustainability, it needs to roll down from the strategy perspective all the way down to operationalize and what are the targets and metrics, what are the report card by organizations in terms of communicating what are their sustainability contributions towards the global agenda. Next, this also just gives some overview. If we look into the S&P 500 surveys, we see that a lot of sectors are already moving into this contributing towards SDG, for example, sustainable. We see, for example, from the industrial itself, these are the most responded that we get, about 141 companies within the Russell thousands anticipate within this surveys. And we see that the level of participants aligning on SDG is currently at 31%. This is relatively low compared to the other sectors, and hence, but this also triggers the difficulty for the sector itself to transition towards this one. Like for example, just now when we're talking about cement being one of the main emission contributors, people are talking about green cement, but currently there are no such technology, no such material available within the sectors. So a lot of R&D should be in place to address how they want to transition towards low carbon materials. Some of the key trends, aside from electrifying the vehicles, we see that, for example, like for some sectors that are involved within the shipping sectors also, like within the shipping itself, that under the regulation of IMO, for example, the IMO have also set the decarbonization strategy and committing to net zero within certain years. And hence, like for shipping companies, how they want to explore the alternate fuels and how they want to revise their current operation with regards to waste management throughout the operations. So e-mobility are one of the key areas, circular economy and decarbonizations. So as mentioned, that as a lot of companies, like in Malaysia itself, we see the financial institutions, utility company, oil and gas sectors, they are looking into decarbonizing, including their sector scope 3. So when they're talking about scope 3, it's more on their managing their supply chains. So with regards to this, how the manufacturing sectors are able to position themselves to meet this kind of future demands. And talking about the solution itself, it's not a really, as mentioned, it's not really a walk in the park. It needs to look in the overall strategy, coming from strategy, planning, performance, operations, talent and workforce, as well as the governance and how we want to communicate with our stakeholders. And this will be my last slide. So adopting end-to-end sustainability strategies is key. Is need to discover what are the impact of the global mega trends to our businesses, how we want to retain our stakeholders, how we want to make sure that our business remain resilient. Then we need to navigate by identifying what are the potential climate risks, be it physical risks or transition risks. Like for example, some countries, including our neighboring countries, Singapore, they have introduced the carbon tax, in which they will also affect to our operations financially. And within some landscape that, for example, again, example from Singapore, they have also imposed a certain level of consumption for businesses, energy consumptions. If the consumptions are higher than the standards, then the allowable, they will be subjected to certain penalty. So with regards to Malaysia, currently we don't have such a compliance market yet. But as per word of the streets, there will be an act coming out either sometime next year. We'll be looking into this kind of areas with regards to the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Acts. This is to drive businesses in terms of more to use the energy more prudently in terms of addressing the energy transition and energy trilemma. And after identifying what's the risk, what the opportunities that we can leverage on, then we need to activate to operationalize the sustainability strategy and ultimately how we will want to measure our performance and communicate with stakeholders. So these are the end-to-end sustainability strategies that business can look into moving forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. That very comprehensive roadmap to pivot towards sustainability. That was, of course, Ibrahim Arifin, Senior Manager, Climate Change and Sustainability Services at EY Consulting. Up next, we are privileged to have with us Dr. Musami Bhatt. She's Vice President of Sustainability Programs at SEMI, which is a trade association. She joins us remotely. Dr. Musami is responsible for leading teams, devising and directing client engagements, and also overseeing processes and deliverables in environmental stewardship, supply chain resilience, and supplier resilience. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shuning. Thank you, fellow panelists. And I don't have any slides. I'm having enough trouble just staying on the screen here, so forgive me. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to participate in the 50th anniversary of E&E. This forum is very relevant and very timely. As we've heard through the morning, there's plenty going on in the world. And keeping up with the theme of today's forum, I would like to talk about what may be on top of most business leaders' minds, i.e. how the ESG journey fits in with everything else that is going on in the world. So we're all adjusting to a post-pandemic world, the geopolitical uncertainties, the supply and energy crisis created by the Ukraine-Russia war, and to top it all, the high inflation rate. And if we've learned anything from the pandemic, we have seen how heavily interdependent our respective economies are. And everywhere we are experiencing either direct or indirect repercussions from these events, and these shockwaves are not insignificant. So a lot of business leaders might be asking, how do we work on sustainability when everything else is that is going on, with everything else that is going on in the world? Well, I agree with them, and the world is definitely going through a storm, and these are all very pressing needs. But Shuning talked about COP27, and I want to answer that question that is on business leaders' mind with something. I was at COP27 with something I learned there in Egypt a few weeks ago. I want to quote from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' opening speech at COP27. Antonio Guterres said, "Indeed, many of today's conflicts are linked with the growing climate chaos. The war in Ukraine has exposed the profound risks of our fossil fuel addiction, and today's crisis cannot be an excuse for backsliding or greenwashing. It is unacceptable, outrageous, and self-defeating to put it on the back burner. If anything, they are a reason for greater urgency, stronger action, and effective accountability." And I would like to add additional innovation, and we've heard some of that already today. So human activity, he also said, human activity is the cause of the climate problem, and so human action must be the solution. So I want us to regroup and think about, or rather talk about the elephant in the room. And essentially, I would like to do a call to action to reestablish our ambition, following on the note by the UN Secretary General at COP27. And I'm going to talk about a little bit, I'm going to probably be repeating some of the themes that have been spoken about, but I'd like us to contemplate 5 key elements in order to manage our business while we also manage our sustainability journey. So essentially, we need to be paying attention to our 3 Ps, people, profit, and planet, and focus on the triple bottom line. So how do we do that? So we need to start by reframing our business model. We may need to commit to a holistic approach to sustainability and to sign up for a just transition. So it is important to be mindful that as we deploy our EVs, as we move towards renewable energy, that we are being sensitive to the part of the business that is most likely going to be sabotaged. So there is a path for that, and we need to be paying attention to just transition. It is not business as usual. It will also require us to create business models that take a long-term socioeconomic consideration. Also referenced in the earlier session, we have to get past the short-term planning or the quarterly, while the quarterly emphasis is important in order to bring economic value into our businesses, it is important to be aware of the long-term socioeconomic changes that are going on and to be building it into our business plan. And again, repeating this on the third point, I would like to emphasize again, there is something called a tyranny of short-termism, which most of our businesses today easily revert to, since it is our comfort zone, since it is a mature model. The financial models that we follow is rather mature, so we tend to drop down on it. But it is important to remember that we have to get past the tyranny of short-termism, and we need to put ESG into our boardrooms. You can tell we went through this journey with safety. We went through this journey in the semiconductor industry with quality, and we need to do this also with sustainability. It took a while to get these events, these businesses, or these organizations or sub-organizations into our boardroom. But it is time for us to get our ESG into our boardroom. Our leadership, the fourth point is around leadership. Our leaders need to be purpose-driven leaders. And a couple of skills that they need to have are, they need to be reflective, they need to be resilient. This is not a short-term journey. This is a long-term journey. You're not going to see results every quarter. You really have to steer the ship that we have brought where we have over the past 5 decades of our semiconductor growth and business. And they have to be entrepreneurial. We heard this throughout the morning. What is the next black swan was the question to Jan. So we're already contemplating the next black swan. But rather than worrying about what it is, we need to build our leaders to be able to deal, to be agile, and to almost be entrepreneurial, and to think, okay, there is something that's going to happen, but how can I make my business resilient? And then there is the complexity. We used to have, there is this fantastic article that was sent around in terms of how stable business used to be in China once upon a time. But we cannot make those assumptions anymore. There will be complexities in our businesses. So the purpose-driven business leader needs to have qualities around being reflective, being resilient, being entrepreneurial, and being able to navigate through complexities in a changing world. And finally, we don't just need to bring in talent. Yes, we need to bring in talent, but our talent needs to have green literacy. So remember the transition we made when we went into a digital world. Digital literacy is what we deployed. We deployed it into our classrooms. We reskilled our workforce. We did it across the board. And the same way, we need to bring in digital literacy into our task force. We need to bring in green literacy into our task force, into our classrooms, and every level of management. So I want to leave you with that thought, and I'm going to send this back to Shuning right now.
Thank you for your presentation. It's a very timely reminder that we must press on with this ESG agenda despite the current geopolitical tensions and even the economic crisis that we are facing. That was, of course, Dr. Musami, but she's the Vice President of Sustainability Programs at SEMI. They are a trade association. Last but not least, to my left, we have KB Chan, Senior Advisor, Delivery Center of Excellence Global Sales Learning and Development at Dell Technologies. He's the company's regional certified rep on ESG since 2020 and an active member in the company's employee resource group activities. KB, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Sounding. Could I have my slides, please? Once again, thank you to the organizers, MSIA, MIDA, right, and also my fellow panelists, right, for having me here. It is a great privilege, right, to be up here, sharing my perspectives and also a case study, right, that I would like to bring to all of you with regards to what we do at Dell Technologies, right, when it comes to the ESG agenda. So I think, let me see if this works. Okay, right. So ESG is becoming a very important topic, and to Musami's how our previous panelist, what she has mentioned that ESG needs to be on the boardroom, right? I would say it is no longer an option, right? ESG is no longer an option. It is something that we must do, as responsible corporate citizens, right, and also companies of the world today. So I think very quickly, right, I'll be sharing with all of you with regards to the Dell social impact story. What are some of the key pillars that we have when it comes to our Dell's Progress Made Real vision? And in particular, one of the pillars over here would be in terms of advancing sustainability, which is the topic for this forum, by the way. Okay, and a little bit later on, when we have time, during the Q&A, I would also like to share with you our Dell Asia Pacific Customer Center 2, which is located at Bukit Tengah in Penang. How we run our flagship project when it comes to the solar panel farm, right? So I hope to be able to share some of that information with all of you. So let's move on. Okay. All right. So since our inception, right, back in 1984, as you all know, the founder himself and also our CEO, Mr. Michael Dell, right? And, we have never wavered from our objectives, our purpose, which is we create technologies that drive, I repeat, we create technologies that drive human progress, right? And that has been very, very consistent. The fact that I joined the company back in 1998, in sales, by the way, right? I've been with the company for more than 20 years, by the way. And we have been very consistent, right? When it comes to sustainability, I still recall we even offered the global take back, right, program, where we actually take back PCs, right, from our customers. And it's not just Dell PCs, by the way. We take back every other brand, right, as well. So that is something that's very interesting, right? 30 years forward, we still do that. We still do that until today. So that is something that's really remarkable. When it comes to our Dell Moonshot Goals 2030, and this is the where we're sailing towards, right? When it comes to achieving that Moonshot Goals, and a lot of companies also have that Moonshot Goals. Whereas ours, right, we have these 4 major pillars, which is on advancing sustainability, cultivating inclusion, transforming lives, as well as upholding ethics and privacy. A little bit more about these pillars, right? Of course, today I'll be talking more about advancing sustainability, right? Where, for example, we will reuse and recycle an equivalent product. Every product that you buy, we will reuse and recycle back, right? And also in terms of our packaging, 100% of our packaging is based on recycled material, right? And we're also looking at 50% of our product content will be made from recycled or renewable material there as well. So we are there, right? We are very, very close. Cultivating inclusion, of course, we're looking at gender equality. 50% of our workforce, as well as 40% of our leadership team will be women, right? And that's very important. And we do have a policy as well when it comes to Hispanics as well as blacks as well in the US. But I'm not going to talk about that. More importantly is the next pillars as well, transforming lives, where we're targeting to transform the lives of 1 billion people on planet Earth by 2030. How to make their lives become better so that they can advance in their lives, as well as upholding ethics and privacy as well. That's so crucial when it comes to our customers' data, retention and so forth. How do we also automate, right, our processes within? So the first pillar over here, advancing sustainability, and this is something I feel very passionate about. I feel very strongly about. Every day in my life, I have this personal mission not to send items to the landfill. I don't know about you all, right? It breaks my heart to see items being sent to the landfill, especially rubbish. So I give it a thought, right? How do I reduce sending those items, right, to the landfill? And it starts with all of us. It starts with all of us in this room. All right, we can't just be expecting our top management to walk the talk. We ourselves also need to walk the talk when it comes to sustainability, all right, in our lives. So let's move on, right? I think over here, our fellow panelists have also talked about it, right? We spoke about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So I won't go too much into that because our fellow panelists have already touched too much already on that. But we do have a timeline on that as well. Now, we are looking at accelerating the circular economy. Circular economy over here means whatever items that we produce, for example, computers, servers, and so forth, we try to have this closed loop economy where it's being reused, is being recycled, and is being repurposed back, rather than, as I said, being sent over to the landfill. I'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, and also protecting the people who make our products, our suppliers, our supply chain, right? Human rights and so forth. So those are very, very important for us as well. Right. So we have scope 1 over here when it comes to the carbon emissions, 50% reduction by 2030. And when I share with you about the solar panel farm, right, later on Dell APCC2, that is one of our key steps towards achieving 100% renewable energy by 2040. Okay, and also in terms of 60% reduction in supply chain emissions per unit of revenue as well, right, from our suppliers. I think this is something that we can agree on, right? We produce e-waste, right? In fact, e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world today. We don't know what to do, right? Once we like to upgrade. My smartphone changes every 1 or 2 years, for example, right? Your computers get upgraded every few years. What do you do with it? Do we even give a thought as to what happens after we discard it, after we dispose it? All right, so we want to change that. As I've mentioned, right, the circular economy over here is very, very crucial for us to maintain the material in this closed loop economy so that the material does not go to waste. And I will talk more about that, right? So what do we do, right? So we look at design, we look at using back sustainable material, recycled material, how to ensure that it's durable, the longevity of it. We repair, we refurbish, we take back the products from our customers. Customers who buy competitor products as well. We take back and we reuse or recycle or refurbish. We dematerialize. Did you know that memories, like for example, memory DIMMs have gold in it? Yeah, very useful for the thief. But anyway, just joking. But anyway, you can actually use that gold, right? It's worth a lot of money, provided you know how to break it down and harvest it. Okay? And also, we look at our business model as well. So through our products or solutions like the Apex as a service solutions, whereby you do not necessarily need to own the product, right? All you have to do is to kind of, we can actually lease it to you, or you can actually pay as you use, right? And we will help you to take back the product, once you're done with it and so forth, you want to upgrade, so that you don't have to worry about recycling it, right? Or how to dispose of it, all right? Having that kind of headache, right? Make sense? All right, let's move on. Yeah, we have a few more. Oops, it's not moving. I think this is my last, probably one of my last 2 slides, right? And you can actually read from our FY22 ESG report that we share publicly on our website. How much material that we use, we actually refurbish, repurpose. I just take, for example, a few items over here. So we use plastics from recycled computers, right? And that's already been available since 2014 on a range of PCs and laptops, right? Apart from that, carbon fiber that we reclaim from aerospace industry, and we know that it's very durable and very lightweight, right? And we use that as the material for our laptop bases as well as leads as well. Packaging, we know it's 100%. Ocean-bound plastics as well. Plastics from windshields, your car windshields. You actually make it into the layer, of waterproof waterproof on your laptop bags. Okay. Apart from that, there are other items as well that's being shown over here. But we walk the talk when it comes to this, right? 100% recycled material for packaging, right? And a host of other items, tall oil, byproducts from paper making process that we use as bioplastic for our selected laptops. Okay. I think this is probably my last slide. I think this just goes to show our commitment as a responsible corporate citizen of the world. The amount of items that we have used and also diverted away from the landfills, right? And turned back into making, into the products for our we use 125 plus products using recycled plastics from used electronics, as I mentioned, e-waste, right? So it's something that we ought to, it's no longer an afterthought, right? We ought to give a thought about it. How much e-waste that we're throwing away daily, right? 21% of laptop leads are from bioplastics. So these are all material that we can actually reuse, right? Natural materials that we can actually use to make our products. I think the other one I will save it for the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your insightful presentation. KB Chan is from Dell Technologies. Now, at this point, it's Q&A, and to get the ball rolling, I will ask the first question. Vichy, what are the specific challenges that Western Digital faced from a sustainability context and the innovative solutions deployed to address it?
Yeah, so I touched on it, but I can go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, give us an example.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we looked at doing, for example, as you continue to grow, the demand for storage grows, is how do we reduce, we've done life cycle assessments where a big chunk of the energy consumption is during the use of the product. So how do you minimize the energy consumed by the product? So we have design work that is done both on the HDD and the flash side. But what we're trying to do is, with the same amount of energy, can we stack up more storage? So that's one example of how we go about overcoming some of these challenges from a design perspective so that overall our greenhouse gas emissions reduce.
Okay. Ibrahim, in the past, actually it's not the past, it's currently even now. I mean, the mantra for companies is maximizing profit for shareholders, right? So what is the motivation for companies to transition their business strategy and incorporating ESG into the framework, especially when they think, oh, it's going to cost me X dollar? How do you overcome this mindset?
Thank you for the questions. So I would say from that perspective, I would say we might need to look on the broader view of four perspectives. The first one is more in terms of grabbing the opportunity for growth. The second one is more in terms of retaining the workforce, the talented workforce. The third one is access to capital. And the fourth one, I would say regulatory requirement. So if I go into deep dive into each one, for example, the opportunity for growth. So you see, like for example, give an example like solar technology. I would say that in the past decades, this solar technology is a very alien to Malaysia landscape. Only several small-scale initiatives already been in place, and a lot of talks is talked about that. Or the solar technology is a disruptive technology. It is an expensive solutions. But over the years, we have seen that as the technology have been deployed more in a bigger scales, then we see that the affordability have reached the tipping point. More companies, and even nowadays, even the residential consumers are also like already like exploring the solar potential, for example. And same goes. So this will unlock a new business opportunities in addition to addressing what's the potential risk. For example, when we're relying on the shipping industry, for example, due to the increase of regulations, increase of carbon tax in the European markets, for example, under the CBAM market. So these are some of the initiatives that business need to look into when they are sourcing from things from Europeans, from Europe, for example. What will be the carbon tax implications to their businesses and profitability? So if we are able to identify this kind of risk and able to navigate the risk, revise our supply chains ahead of time to navigate within this risk, then we are able to make sure that our business remain resilient regardless of the upcoming trends on the carbon markets, for example. On the second one, on the talent workforce, so I would say that a lot of attentions have been dwell within this decarbonizations, green technologies, green economy, renewable energy, for example, and people are looking for this kind of workforce with this kind of skill sets, with this kind of expertise. And again, if we see that the rising of the next generations, Generation Z or millennials, they are also like putting the sustainability at the heart. And to my surprise, for example, like within the school syllabus nowadays, to my surprise that even at the primary school level, they are already been educated on the sustainability. So as they grow, I would say that this sustainability is what they have in mind. And when they want to join any particular companies, any particular workforce, these are the areas that they are looking into. So ultimately, when the company, we need the new workforce with new skill sets, and ultimately we're coming from the next generations. This is one of the ways how we want to attract the new talents within our organizations. And next, on the access to capital. So this is also, we have seen that the capital also have shifted from shareholders to stakeholders values creations. So in particular, if you see that from the local fund managers, local banks, for example, they are also already talking about going for net zero portfolio by 2050, by 2030, for example. And ultimately, for every projects, everything that we need, mostly we need some sort of access to the financing. And this in line with the financial institution itself. They are locating more green finance mechanism to support green initiative. And in particular, if you see from the ASEAN landscape, like for the past 5 years, about 55 billion USD have been invested for this green transition, green economy. And again, like forecasting what we need for the next until 2030, for example, additional about USD 3 trillions are needed for this kind of transitions. So fund managers as well as the financial institutions are aligning their strategy, business strategy, portfolio strategy to provide more financing with regards to this space. So ultimately, for businesses to secure a better financing, the better premium on the financing schemes, these are some of the areas that they need to look into. And in addition, like for example, like Malaysia will also launch the voluntary carbon market sometime this month. And again, that this will enable businesses to monetize their carbon emission initiative to gain additional revenue for the companies. The last one, on the regulatory requirements. So I would say that Bursa Malaysia, the Malaysia Exchange, also have mandated all companies to in line with this ESG and sustainability. And ultimately, since 2015, they have mandated it, but have become more regulated by 2024. So if you see that all public listed companies, all the big companies within Malaysia are also subjected to these transitions, and hence this will follow through by their supply chains and value chains as well. I would say that these are the four perspectives. When we say that what need to be what motivates businesses, these are some of the 4 items that we can see.
Okay, interesting. And actually, voluntary carbon trading will start on the 9th of December. Bursa Malaysia has announced it. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of participation there will be. Dr. Musami, I have a question for you, and it's a more holistic question. So how should the E&E sector actually pivot towards sustainability in a holistic manner, and also to avoid accusations of greenwashing? Doc, is she here? Oh, she's dropped out. Okay, so let me get back to the gentlemen here that are present. We'll try and get back to her in a minute. But KB, I have a question for you. So is this pivot towards sustainability in part driven by shareholders? I mean, Ibrahim brought up a point, a lot of fund managers now, of course, have ESG mandates. So is the pressure coming from there? I mean, is it the fact of life that companies have to be changed, or their share prices will actually see negative repercussions?
Well, there will always be expectations from shareholders, but from high level overview,
Yes.
yeah, I would say yes to that. But also more importantly, as I mentioned earlier on, we as responsible corporate citizens of the world, right? Where do we want to steer our company towards right, in the next 10, 20, or 30 years? And it's something that we ought to listen carefully, with empathy, to our shareholders, as you said, right, or stakeholders, as you mentioned, right? And if that's the direction that they're going, they are emphasizing on ESG. In fact, 95% of our RFPs, or requests for proposals, contain ESG criteria. So it's like, for example, energy saving, what kind of material do you use, cooling, for example. All right, that has to be a must criteria, right, when they request for proposals from our company. So 95% of the RFPs will contain ESG criteria. And that's very important, yes, to the fact that, yes, I do see, in that sense, this kind of external factors that require a compliance, right, when it comes to ESG. But also, right, more importantly, we ourselves as a company, Dell Technologies over here, that we need to walk the talk, right? If we don't walk the talk, how are people going to look at us? What is our branding? Because ESG, whether you like it or not, has a direct correlationship with branding, right, of the company. All right. Apart from branding, I think we cannot deny the fact that it has a financial value that's tied to it as well, because people look at you, people want to buy from you. You're being a responsible corporate citizen. You recycle, you reuse, you repurpose your products, and therefore, customers or stakeholders like to be aligned with such companies, for example.
So ESG premium almost assigned.
kind of it, but there's also the moral value that comes with it as well. The consciousness of doing the right things at the end of the day, right? It transcends, it transcends the branding, transcends the financial value, and this brings me to my third point over here. There's also the societal value that ties to it, right? What do we do as responsible community members? Do we order from a vendor that, does not recycle or repurpose, blah, blah, blah?
Even though they're cheaper.
Even though they're cheaper, right? Or even though the price can be more competitive. Right? But at the end of the day, it's also about the moral value, about doing the right things for ourselves, as well as our company, and also for the community. I've leave this question back to you all. I mean, the ball is in your court.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vishy, I have a question for you. From a Western digital plant perspective, can you go even further in your journey towards higher standards of sustainability? Because I hear this phrase, net zero production. Is that ever possible? I mean, aside from energy consumption, using renewables, reducing gas emissions, or even water management, is it possible one day?
Well, I think if you set our minds to it, anything is possible. I think we firstly have to achieve our near-term goals, which are set for 2030. But what we took from this recognition, or whatever related to the World Economic Forum, I think what the World Economic Forum or such bodies look to industry to do is to influence other companies, other suppliers, other people in your entire supply chain and help them out. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to showcase what got us here, hopefully with the intent that, you know, they would be part of the bandwagon, and eventually you would have an entire supply chain that is actually more sustainable. I mean, you need that. You cannot just have, I think with KB's presentation, he talked about some of their suppliers for Dell who are going down the path. We are one of those, right? So we supply into Dell. So it has to be a concerted effort by everybody to kind of work through this. And if we do so, I think just like Bernard shared in the case of STM, you know, there is definitely that path where you can get to zero carbon production or zero carbon offset, and you were planning to do that in 40 years, right? Since conception. I mean, since conception. So they're planning to do that by 2027. So that's incredible. I mean, you need a whole supply chain to go along with you to get to that.
Okay, we have Dr. Musami back, so I'm going to ask her, you know, how should this E&E sector approach this pivot to sustainability in a holistic manner and avoid accusations of greenwashing?
Okay, thank you for that. Some of it has already been talked about, but I want to emphasize on one topic, which is collaboration. It's collaboration beyond the level of your own industry. And I also want to talk about what we as a trade organization or a consortium of semiconductor companies are doing in that regard. Vishy talked about it just now as well on collaboration, and I wanted to double click on it. KB had a great example. He talked about how Dell not only takes their own PCs back for circularity, but PCs from anywhere back. And we need to elevate ourselves to that level of conversation. And I want to try and share one slide with you and then talk about how we should be doing it within E&E. So recently, we have launched what we call the Semiconductor Climate Consortium. It's the first climate consortium from the semiconductor industry. There are many consortiums. There are many other industries that have been on this journey for a long time. But for the semiconductor industry, it's the first one. And it's a reflection of the fact that the semiconductor industry actually wants to go beyond their own you know, the corporates want to go beyond their own walls and work at a different level of collaboration. So let me try and, do I have sharing? I do. Okay. So very quickly, I just want to show this one slide. I hope you can all see it. Do you all see my slide?
Yes, we do.
Okay, awesome. So at COP27 on November 10th, we had the opportunity to launch the Semiconductor Climate Consortium. The Climate Consortium is, the members of the Climate Consortium have basically signed up to working collaboratively and delivering towards the 1.5 degree pathway. And it's based on three key tenets. They have signed up for collaboration. We've heard collaboration a lot today, and this is industry level collaboration and perhaps even beyond the industry. Transparency, which is to provide you know, our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 reporting. Today, only about 36% of our industry's reporting. We need to get very good visibility into where we are so we can focus our energy into working on the tough spots. And finally, ambition, which is to keep this ambition of 1.5 degrees by 2050 in sight. But not just that, to be setting short-term goals, which is goals by 2025, 2030, to be able to guarantee a path to 1.5 degrees in 2050. So I'm very proud to announce that we had 65 founding members. You can see their names up there on the left. And and on the stage we have WD. So WD is one of our members. So congratulations and thank you. And you can see that since we did the launch at COP27, we've had a few more companies come in. So we've got about 70 companies right now. Bessie has come in. So that's 2 companies from Malaysia. And I would say that this is something that E&E can do, which is join the consortium, bring your problem statements, and let's work collaboratively to find the best solutions. And then I also want to share that we had the honor of having Al Gore, U.S. ex-Vice President Al Gore, inaugurate and endorse this event and essentially put a challenge up to our industry to be able to deliver and deliver to our 1.5 degree ambition while we continue to grow at the at the 8% CAGR that we have projected right now. We also had some of our member companies at the event. Featured here is ASM PT from Singapore, ASM International, John Golightly, Samsung CSO Claire, and then Schneider Electric, all of who are members of our consortium. And I'd like to encourage those with expertise and a goal and a mission, those that share this mission and vision to drive towards net zero in the semiconductor industry, to come join our consortium so we can action our ambition. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot to talk about, but I'm going to turn this back to you, Shuning.
All right, thank you. This question from the floor, Ibrahim, and it's how does ESG inform international trade and compliance in the E&E industry? So how does EY, Energy Commission, and even SEDA assist in providing the platform for Scope 2 and 3?
Thank you. So with regards to I would say that from the perspective of Scope 2, in particular, that people are talking about getting the clean energy into their businesses. So for example, if you see the change of landscape within the Malaysia itself, within the power sector, I would say that back then in 2010, so if I just remember that back then I see that when, for example, like Google, they have interested to establish their base in Malaysia, for example. And at that time, one of their asks is that they want to get their supply 100% from renewable energy. So at that time, like the utilities are not able to accommodate for that. And hence, the Google have choose to shift their intention elsewhere. So in particular, I would say that this is a loss of opportunity for the country itself for not enable this kind of demands. But moving forward, so I would say that from the 2010, there are a lot of new mechanisms already been in place, starting from the feed-in tariff in 2011. So we have seen a lot of more renewable energy come into the grid system, in particular solar, bioenergy, hydro, for example. Then in 2016, there are more mechanisms in place, focusing more on solar technology, seeing that these are the most competitive with regards to the affordability, as well as the flexibility of installations. So since 2016, programs like net energy metering have been introduced, in which they are able to penetrate each of the sectors, either be from the residential, industrial, or commercial. They are able to participate as one of the energy solutions that are able to address their own consumption, as well as provide some revenues with regards to selling back to the grid, for example. So it can go to two tiers with regards to the benefits. Then it goes to the renewable energy certificate market, REC market. Then in 2021, TMB also have come up with a new tariff mechanism that is called the Green Electricity Tariff, even though it was subjected to certain limit of subscriptions, but they are able to facilitate the transition for addressing the Scope 2 of business operations. And as mentioned by Mr. Vishy just now, that last month, if I'm not mistaken, the Corporate Green Procurement Program was introduced, that this will enable a more capacity of renewable energy to be transferred for businesses to decarbonize their emissions. So I would say that this in particular will affect business as well as the energy needed for manufacturing process that they can leverage from this energy solution and energy transitions.
Okay, we have time for just one last question for you, KB. I noticed in your slides you have moonshot goals for 2030. But who measures progress? And are there any such things as global standards? I mean, who's accountable? Is it for you if these KPIs are not met?
Well, yeah, we do have global standards, right, to measure. If you heard of the GRI index, we practice transparency and accountability, right? And as I mentioned as well earlier on, Xiaoning, we have the FY22 ESG report, which came out in last July, and it's available on our website. In fact, we've been publishing it since FY20, right? So it's been 3 years right now. So, do have a look, because, the measurements wise and so forth, we have to be accountable to our stakeholders, our partners, as well as our executives. So it's important that we practice this transparency and accountability over here. Yes, so and that's a very crucial barometer when it comes to our ESG measurements.
Okay, all right. Thank you. On that note, we have unfortunately run out of time. Thank you to our panel today to discuss sustainability in the E&E industry. Joining us was Vishy Ramaswamy, General Manager and VP of Western Digital Penang. Ibrahim Arifin, he's Senior Manager, Climate Change and Sustainability Services at EY Consulting. Dr. Musami Bhatt, Vice President of Sustainability Program, SEMI, which is a trade association. She joined us remotely, of course. And KB Chan, Senior Advisor, Delivery Center of Excellence, Global Sales, Learning and Development from Dell Technology. Abby, back to you.
Right, thank you. Can I just ask Dr. Musumi to stay online to have a... She has already logged out, yeah. Okay, can we take a group photo with all our panelists and moderator?
Sure.